Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, I need you to understand something. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a story about survival, sacrifice, and the brutal cost of truth in a world built on lies. If you're ready to witness a woman destroy herself to save a man who will repay her only with hatred, if you want to see cruelty meet its match in silence, then stay until the very end. You won't believe what happens when the truth finally comes to light. Drop a like, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, and let's begin. The rain came down like judgment itself. It hammered against the slate roof of Blackmore House, turning the London estate's gardens into rivers of mud and despair. Inside the great hall, candles flickered in their sconces, casting shadows that danced across walls hung with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Men and women who had built empires, commanded respect, wielded power with iron fists. Adrian Blackmore stood before the fireplace, watching flames consume seasoned oak. He did not turn when the door opened. He knew who it was. He had been expecting this moment for weeks, dreading it, craving it, hating every second that brought it closer. "Your Grace," the voice belonged to his solicitor, Mr. Pemberton, a thin, nervous man who had served the Blackmore family for 30 years and looked as though each one had aged him twice over. "Is it done?" Adrian's voice was cold, flat. He still didn't turn. "The settlement is signed. Miss Vance has agreed to all terms. The wedding is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 o'clock. St. Margaret's has been prepared. The witnesses—" "I don't care about witnesses." Adrian finally turned. His face was a study in controlled fury, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that burned with something beyond anger, a mouth set in a line that suggested he had forgotten how to smile. At 32, he looked older, harder. "I care that she understands what this is. What she's getting. Nothing. She gets nothing from me but a name she doesn't deserve." Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. "Your Grace, if I may speak plainly—" "You may not. The settlement is extraordinarily harsh. No allowance, no property rights, no claim to the Blackmore fortune beyond basic subsistence. You're essentially making her a prisoner." "Good." Adrian turned back to the fire. "That's exactly what she deserves. A prison. For the rest of her miserable life." Pemberton fell silent. He had tried over the past weeks to suggest moderation, to remind the Duke that vengeance was a dish best served with caution. But Adrian Blackmore was beyond caution. He was beyond reason. The scandal that had destroyed his family 18 months ago had left him with nothing but rage and a burning need to make someone pay. And Lydia Vance, beautiful, ruined Lydia Vance, was going to pay for everything. "Leave me," Adrian said quietly. Pemberton bowed and retreated, pulling the heavy doors closed behind him. Alone, Adrian stared into the flames and remembered. 18 months earlier. The Blackmore name had meant something then. Respect. Influence. A dukedom that stretched back 200 years built on military service, strategic marriages, and shrewd investments. Adrian had inherited it all at 28 when his father died, and he had worn the responsibility well, better than well. He had been brilliant, dynamic, the kind of duke who modernized estates, invested in railways, understood that old money needed new thinking to survive. And then the scandal broke. It started with whispers, rumors of financial impropriety, suggestions that the late Duke had engaged in fraud, that Blackmore investments were built on lies and embezzlement. At first, Adrian dismissed it as jealousy. There were always men eager to tear down success. But the whispers became accusations. Anonymous letters appeared in newspaper offices. Documents surfaced, ledgers, contracts, correspondence, all pointing to a massive scheme to defraud investors. The evidence was damning, overwhelming, impossible to deny. Within weeks, Adrian's world collapsed. Investors fled. Business partners cut ties. Society matrons who had once fought for invitations to Blackmore balls suddenly found prior commitments. The Duke of Blackmore, once courted, admired, envied, became a pariah overnight. And at the center of it all, one name appeared again and again in the documents, in the testimony, in the carefully constructed web of lies. Lydia Vance. She had been his father's ward, the orphaned daughter of a minor baronet, taken in by the old Duke out of charity, or so everyone believed. Beautiful, intelligent, educated beyond her station. She had lived at Blackmore House for 5 years before the scandal, managing the household, organizing the social calendar, trusted with everything. The investigators painted a clear picture. Lydia had helped the old Duke orchestrate the fraud. She had access to documents, to correspondence, to the inner workings of Blackmore finances. Witnesses came forward. Servants who claimed they had seen her with ledgers late at night, business associates who swore she had carried messages, delivered instructions, facilitated meetings. When the authorities came for her, she didn't run. She sat in the drawing room of Blackmore House, hands folded in her lap, and listened to the accusations without expression. She didn't defend herself, didn't deny anything, didn't speak at all except to say, through her lawyer, that she would accept full responsibility for her actions. The confession destroyed what little remained of her reputation. The newspapers called her a schemer, a Jezebel, a woman who had used her position to seduce and manipulate a dying old man. Society turned on her with savage glee. She was banned from decent homes, cut from invitation lists, hounded in the streets. Her family, what remained of it, disowned her publicly. Adrian should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt hollow. Because even with Lydia's confession, even with her complete social annihilation, the damage was done. The Blackmore name was ruined. Adrian spent the next year fighting lawsuits, settling claims, liquidating assets to pay debts his father and Lydia had created. He lost fortunes. He lost friends. He lost everything that made life worth living. And through it all, one thought sustained him: make her pay. The opportunity came from an unexpected source: Lydia's brother, Thomas Vance. Thomas was a gambler, a wastrel, a man who had burned through his own inheritance and was desperately searching for more. He came to Adrian with a proposition wrapped in barely concealed desperation. "Marry her," Thomas said, pacing Adrian's study like a trapped animal. "Marry Lydia. Take her off my hands. I can't afford to support her anymore, and no one else will touch her. She's completely ruined." Adrian stared at him. "Why would I marry the woman who destroyed my family?" "Because it's the perfect punishment." Thomas leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Think about it, Your Grace. Society expects you to hate her, and you do. But if you marry her, you control her completely. You can make her life a living hell, and it will all be perfectly legal. She'll be trapped. No escape. No hope. Just endless suffering under your authority." It was twisted, cruel, exactly what Adrian wanted. "What do you get out of this?" Adrian asked coldly. "A settlement. Enough to clear my debts and start fresh. Once she's yours, she's no longer my problem." Thomas's smile was ugly. "She'll do it. She doesn't have a choice. She's penniless, ruined, alone. You're offering her survival, even if it's a miserable one." Adrian considered it. Marriage as punishment. It had a certain poetic justice, and Thomas was right. Once she was his wife, she would be completely under his control. He could send her away, isolate her, make sure she spent every day regretting what she had done. "Draw up the papers," Adrian said finally. "But understand this. She gets nothing. No allowance beyond basic necessities. No access to society. No rights to the Blackmore properties or fortune. She will live as I dictate, where I dictate, and if she objects even once, I will make her life even more unbearable than it already is." Thomas practically salivated. "Done. I'll have her signature by tomorrow." The wedding day. St. Margaret's Church was nearly empty. No guests, no celebration, no joy. Just the bare minimum required by law. A priest, 2 witnesses, and the grim formality of vows spoken without meaning. Adrian arrived first, dressed in black as though attending a funeral. Perhaps he was. The death of whatever foolish part of him had once believed in marriage, in partnership, in anything beyond cold strategy and colder revenge. He stood at the altar and waited. The doors opened. Lydia Vance walked down the aisle alone. Adrian had not seen her in 18 months. He had expected her to look diminished, broken by scandal, aged by disgrace. Instead, she looked composed. Her dress was simple, gray wool without ornament, but it fit her perfectly. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was pale, but her expression was calm, almost serene. She walked with her head high, eyes fixed straight ahead. Not defiant, not ashamed, just present. It infuriated him. She reached the altar and stood beside him without looking at him. The priest began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here." Adrian barely heard the words. He was too focused on the woman beside him, trying to understand her composure. Didn't she understand what this was? Didn't she realize she was walking into a prison? "Do you, Adrian Blackmore, Duke of Blackmore, take this woman?" "I do." His voice was hard. "Do you, Lydia Vance, take this man?" There was a pause. A single suspended moment where Adrian thought, hoped, she might refuse, might show some spark of resistance. "I do." Her voice was quiet, steady, final. The priest pronounced them married. Adrian turned to look at his new wife, his prisoner. She met his gaze for the first time, and he saw nothing. No fear, no resentment, no emotion at all. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected nothing back. "Let's go," he said coldly. "Don't." The carriage ride back to Blackmore House was silent. Lydia sat across from him, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window. She didn't speak, didn't fidget, just sat with that same maddening calm. "You understand the terms," Adrian said finally, unable to bear the silence. "You have no claim to my properties, no allowance beyond basic subsistence, no access to society." "Yes, Your Grace." Her voice was soft. "You will address me properly at all times. You will obey without question. You will not embarrass me or the Blackmore name any further than you already have." "Yes, Your Grace." "And you will leave London tonight. I've arranged for you to travel to Ashford Manor, my estate in Northumberland. You will remain there indefinitely. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear from you. You will stay out of my sight until I decide otherwise." For the first time, something flickered in her eyes, but it vanished so quickly he wasn't sure he'd seen it. "As you wish, Your Grace." "Don't you have anything to say?" The words came out harsher than he intended. "Don't you want to defend yourself? Plead for mercy? Something." She turned to look at him fully. Her eyes, large, gray, impossibly sad, met his. "Would it matter, Your Grace?" The question struck him like a physical blow. Because no, it wouldn't matter. Nothing she said would change what he believed. Nothing she said would heal what had been broken. "No," he said coldly, "it wouldn't." "Then there's nothing to say." The carriage stopped. They had arrived at Blackmore House. Adrian's butler opened the door and Adrian stepped out without offering his hand. Lydia followed, moving with quiet grace despite the rain that immediately began soaking her simple dress. Inside, the household staff had assembled, a grim-faced line of servants who had served the Blackmore family for years. They stared at Lydia with barely concealed hostility. Everyone knew who she was, what she had done. "Mrs. Hendricks," Adrian addressed the housekeeper, "take the Duchess to the guest room. She leaves for Northumberland tonight. Pack whatever she needs, basic clothing, nothing more." Mrs. Hendricks, a severe woman in her 60s, curtsied stiffly. "Yes, Your Grace." Lydia stood in the center of the hall, water dripping from her hem, surrounded by hostile faces. She looked small suddenly. Fragile. Good, Adrian thought viciously. Let her feel what it's like to be alone, unwanted, destroyed. "Go," he said dismissively. Lydia followed Mrs. Hendricks up the stairs without a word. Adrian watched her go, then turned and walked to his study. He poured himself a drink, scotch, expensive, burning, and stood at the window watching rain hammer the gardens. It was done. She was his prisoner now, locked away in the far north where she couldn't harm anyone else, where she would spend every day knowing that the man she had helped destroy now controlled her completely. He should have felt satisfaction. Instead, he felt nothing. Just the same hollow emptiness that had defined the past 18 months. Hours later, as midnight approached, Adrian was still in his study when Mrs. Hendricks knocked. "The Duchess's carriage is ready, Your Grace." "Good. Make sure she has everything she needs for the journey. I want her gone within the hour." Mrs. Hendricks hesitated. "Your Grace, may I speak freely?" Adrian looked up, surprised. Mrs. Hendricks had been with the family since before he was born. She rarely offered opinions unasked. "Speak." That girl, Mrs. Hendricks paused, choosing her words carefully. She's not what I expected. When she arrived with her things, she thanked the maids for their help. She asked their names. She didn't complain about the room or the packing or the late hour. The housekeeper frowned. Most women in her position would be hysterical, demanding. She's just quiet. What's your point? No point, Your Grace. Just an observation. Mrs. Hendricks curtsied and left. Adrian returned to his drink, troubled despite himself. Quiet, calm, composed. Why? Why wasn't she fighting? Why wasn't she showing any emotion at all? Unless she was exactly what everyone said she was. A manipulator, a schemer, a woman who had learned to wear masks so perfectly that even now, even in complete defeat, she refused to let the real Lydia show. Yes, that made sense. That fit the narrative. He drained his glass and stood. Time to say goodbye. She was standing at the entrance hall when he arrived, dressed in a traveling cloak, a single small trunk beside her. The household staff had already retreated, either on Mrs. Hendricks's orders or because they couldn't bear to watch. The carriage is ready, Adrian said curtly. The journey to Northumberland takes 3 days. You'll stop at coaching inns along the way. I've arranged for rooms. Don't speak to anyone. Don't draw attention. When you arrive at Ashford Manor, you will be met by the staff there. They have their instructions. Lydia nodded. Yes, Your Grace. One more thing. Adrian moved closer, letting his full height and presence loom over her. Don't mistake this marriage for anything other than what it is. Punishment. You destroyed my family, my name, my life. This is what you've earned. Exile. Isolation. A life lived in the shadows of a house no one visits, with servants who know exactly what you are. You will never escape it. Do you understand? She looked up at him. In the candlelight, her face was impossibly pale, her eyes enormous and dark. I understand, Your Grace, she said quietly. Then, so softly he almost missed it. I'm sorry. The word stunned him. Sorry? He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You're sorry? Is that supposed to mean something? Do you think an apology changes anything? No. She shook her head slowly. I don't think it changes anything. But I am sorry for everything you've lost, for everything you've suffered. She paused. I wish it could have been different. For a moment, just one terrible, suspended moment, Adrian almost believed her. Then reality crashed back. This was what she did. This was her gift, making people believe, making them trust, and then destroying them from the inside. Get out, he said coldly. Get out of my house, out of my city, out of my sight, and don't ever speak to me again unless I command it. Something in her eyes dimmed. The last fragile light of hope, if that's what it had been, extinguished completely. Yes, Your Grace. She picked up her cloak and walked to the door. The footman opened it, revealing the waiting carriage and the rain that hadn't stopped since morning. Lydia paused at the threshold. Your Grace? She didn't turn around. What? Thank you. For what? He couldn't keep the confusion from his voice. For your name. Whatever else this is, your name means I won't starve. It means I have shelter. In a world that wanted to destroy me completely, you've given me survival. That's more than I had before. She stepped into the rain and climbed into the carriage. Adrian watched it pull away, wheels splashing through puddles, disappearing into the London night. Thank you. The words echoed in his mind long after she was gone. Thank you. As though exile was mercy. As though prison was gift. As though being married to a man who hated her was somehow better than being alone. What kind of life had she been living that this cold, cruel arrangement felt like salvation? He turned away, shaking his head. It didn't matter. She deserved whatever she got. She had helped destroy everything he loved, and now she would spend the rest of her life paying for it. That was justice. That was right. So why did he feel like he'd just done something unforgivable? Adrian Blackmore returned to his study, poured another drink, and tried very hard not to think about gray eyes and quiet words and a woman who had thanked him for cruelty. He failed. Outside, the rain continued to fall on London, cold, relentless, washing nothing clean. And far to the north, a carriage carried Lydia Vance toward a future she had chosen not because she wanted it, but because it was the only future left. She sat in darkness, hands folded, face calm. Inside, where no one could see, she was screaming. But Lydia Vance had learned long ago that screaming changed nothing. So she sat in silence, and she endured. Just as she had always endured. Just as she would continue to endure until the truth, the terrible, beautiful, unbearable truth, finally came to light. If it ever did. What? This is where our story begins. With a marriage built on ashes. With a man consumed by hate and a woman carrying a secret that could destroy them both, or save them. Stay with me. Part 2 is coming, and you won't believe what happens when Adrian Blackmore returns to Ashford Manor months later and discovers that the woman he sent away to suffer has done something extraordinary, something impossible. If you're invested in this story, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think of Adrian so far. Is he justified, or is he making the biggest mistake of his life? The carriage disappeared into the rain, and Adrian told himself he was finished with Lydia Vance forever. He was wrong. For 6 months, he didn't think about her, or rather, he tried not to. London consumed him. Rebuilding the Blackmore reputation required constant attention, endless negotiations, strategic appearances at the right gatherings with the right people. He needed society to forget the scandal, to remember only that he was a duke with power and influence. It was exhausting work, made worse by the whispers that followed him everywhere. Poor Blackmore, married to that woman. I heard he sent her away immediately. Smart man. She must be miserable in Northumberland. Nothing up there but rocks and rain. The comments should have satisfied him. Instead, they left him vaguely unsettled in ways he couldn't articulate and refused to examine. Then came the letter from Mr. Graves, the steward at Ashford Manor. Adrian opened it in his study one gray morning, expecting the usual tedious report about crop yields and tenant complaints. What he read instead made him stand up so abruptly his chair toppled backward. Your Grace, I write with matters requiring your immediate attention. The Duchess has undertaken significant changes to the manor and grounds without authorization. The household accounts show irregular expenditures. Several staff members have requested I convey concerns about her activities. I believe your personal intervention is necessary. Your obedient servant, J. Graves Adrian, read it twice, then a third time. Changes? Expenditures? What in hell was she doing? He had sent her to Ashford specifically because it was remote, austere, impossible to do anything with. The manor was a relic, cold, half-furnished, maintained by a skeleton staff who had been instructed to provide basic necessities and nothing more. She was supposed to exist there quietly, a ghost in a forgotten house. Instead, she was apparently spending money and making changes and causing concerns. Fury ignited in his chest. She was testing him, pushing boundaries, seeing how much she could get away with before he stopped her. Well, she was about to learn that Adrian Blackmore didn't tolerate disobedience. He summoned his valet. Pack my things. We're going to Northumberland. Your Grace? The valet looked startled. When? Tomorrow. And send word to the stables. I want the fastest horses. Within 24 hours, Adrian was on the road north. The journey took 3 days of hard riding through increasingly desolate country. England gave way to wilderness. Rolling moors, craggy hills, vast stretches of emptiness broken only by scattered villages and sheep. This was frontier country, harsh and unforgiving, where survival required strength and stubbornness in equal measure. Perfect place for a prison, Adrian thought grimly. By the time he reached Ashford Manor, his anger had crystallized into cold determination. Whatever Lydia was doing, whatever game she was playing, he would put an immediate stop to it. She needed to remember her place, that she was his prisoner, not his partner, and she had no authority to change anything. The manor appeared through morning mist like something from a ghost story, a sprawling stone structure built 2 centuries ago when defense mattered more than comfort. It sat on a windswept hill overlooking miles of moorland, isolated and imposing. Adrian had always hated it, but as his horse climbed the long drive, something made him slow. The grounds looked different. The overgrown hedges that had choked the entrance were gone, replaced by neat borders. The drive itself had been cleared of weeds and re-graveled. Flower beds, actual flower beds, lined the approach, filled with hardy northern blooms that somehow looked both wild and intentional. Adrian frowned. He rounded the final curve and stopped completely. The manor itself had been transformed. Windows that had been shuttered and dark now gleamed with glass and light. The stonework had been cleaned, revealing the golden honey color hidden beneath decades of grime. The entrance, once forbidding and severe, was softened by climbing roses and carefully trimmed ivy. It looked alive. It looked like a home. What the hell? Adrian dismounted, staring. The front door opened before he could knock, and Mr. Graves appeared, a thin, sour-faced man in his 50s who had managed Ashford for 20 years with mechanical efficiency and zero imagination. "Your Grace." Graves bowed stiffly. "We received your message this morning. I've prepared your usual chambers." "Never mind that." Adrian gestured around. "What is all this? The gardens, the cleaning, the—" He struggled for words. "The entire exterior?" Graves's expression soured further. "The Duchess is doing, Your Grace, against my repeated objections, I might add. She insisted on redirecting household funds toward these improvements." "She insisted?" Adrian's voice dropped dangerously. "Since when does she get to insist on anything?" "Since she realized the staff were more loyal to her than to me." Graves practically spat the words. "She went around me, Your Grace, spoke directly to the gardeners, the maids, even the tenants, convinced them all that her plans would benefit everyone. I was overruled at every turn." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Where is she?" "The gardens, I believe. She spends most of her time there." Graves sniffed. "Completely inappropriate for a woman of her station. She works alongside the servants like a common laborer." "Take me to her." Graves led him through the manor, and Adrian noticed more changes with every step. The entrance hall had been cleaned and polished. Fresh flowers sat in vases on tables he didn't remember being there. Paintings that had hung crooked for years were now straight and properly lit. The entire atmosphere was different, warmer somehow, despite the stone walls and northern chill. They emerged into the back gardens, and Adrian stopped again. The neglected wasteland, he remembered, had become something extraordinary. Vegetable beds stretched in orderly rows. Herb gardens spiraled in artistic patterns. Fruit trees had been pruned and shaped. And everywhere, there were people working. Gardeners, stable hands, even some of the tenant farmers, all moving with purpose and coordination. And at the center of it all, directing everything with quiet authority, was Lydia. She wore a simple gray dress with the sleeves rolled up, her dark hair bound in a practical braid. Her hands were dirty. Her face was flushed from exertion. She was kneeling beside one of the raised beds, showing an elderly gardener something about drainage. "If we redirect the water this way, the carrots won't rot. See? The slope needs to run southeast to catch morning sun but avoid afternoon heat. Lydia," his voice cut through the garden noise like a blade. She froze, then slowly stood and turned. For a moment they stared at each other across 30 feet of transformed earth. She looked different, healthier somehow, her face less pale, her posture more confident. But her expression when she saw him was the same as it had been on their wedding day, calm, composed, unreadable. "Your Grace," she curtsied, muddy hands and all. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly." Adrian strode toward her, aware that every person in the garden had stopped working to watch. "What is all this?" "Improvements, Your Grace." "I can see that. What I want to know is why you think you have the authority to make them." She met his gaze steadily. The manor was falling apart. The grounds were unusable. The staff had nothing productive to do. "I gave them purpose." "You gave them—" Adrian struggled to control his temper. "You don't give anyone anything. You don't have the authority. You don't have my permission. You are here as punishment, not as mistress of this estate." Something flickered in her eyes, hurt maybe, or anger, but her voice remained steady. "Yes, Your Grace. I understand." "Do you? Because it seems you've forgotten your place entirely." He gestured around. "All of this stops. Now. The gardens will be returned to their previous state. The household expenditures will be reviewed and reversed, and you will confine yourself to the manor proper. No more working with servants. No more directing staff. No more pretending you're anything other than what you are. a prisoner who overstepped. The gardeners exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of the maids looked close to tears. Lydia's expression didn't change. "As you wish, Your Grace." "Don't." Adrian moved closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Don't do that. Don't pretend to be meek and obedient when you've clearly been doing whatever you wanted for months." "I haven't been doing what I wanted." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I've been doing what was necessary." "Necessary?" He almost laughed. "Flower beds are necessary? Clean windows are necessary?" "Yes." She gestured to the people around them. "These people needed purpose. They needed to believe this place could be more than a forgotten outpost. They needed hope." She paused. "So did I." The honesty of it struck him like a blow. "Hope," he repeated coldly, recovering. "You don't deserve hope. You deserve exactly what you got: exile and isolation." "Then why are you angry that I made the best of it?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. Because she was right. He had sent her here to suffer, and instead she had, what? Survived? Thrived? Built something from nothing? It wasn't supposed to work this way. "Your Grace," Mr. Graves approached nervously. "Shall I begin dismantling the garden projects?" Adrian looked at the beds, the plants, the careful arrangement of everything. Looked at the staff watching with barely concealed distress. Looked at Lydia, standing there with dirt under her nails and dignity in every line of her body. "No," he said finally. "Leave them. For now." He turned to Lydia. "But you will submit all future expenditures to Mr. Graves for approval. You will not make decisions without consultation, and you will remember that this is not your estate to command. Are we clear?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Good. Now clean yourself up. We'll discuss this further inside." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the garden he wanted to hate but couldn't quite manage to. Behind him, he heard the work slowly resume, quieter now, more subdued, but still continuing, still building, still refusing to be broken. Damn her. That evening, Adrian sat in the Manor's library, another room that had been mysteriously improved with better lighting and comfortable furniture, and tried to make sense of his fury. She had disobeyed him, that was clear. She had taken control when she should have remained passive. She had built something when she should have accepted decay. And yet, the Manor was better for it. The staff were clearly happier. Even Mr. Graves, for all his complaints, couldn't deny that productivity had increased dramatically. So why did he want to tear it all down? Because, a voice whispered in his mind, she's proving you wrong. She's showing that even in punishment, even in exile, she's stronger than you expected, and that terrifies you. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter." Lydia came in, properly dressed now in a dark blue gown, her hair pinned up, all traces of dirt removed. She looked like a duchess, which somehow made it worse. "You wanted to speak with me, Your Grace?" "Sit." She sat, hands folded, posture perfect. Adrian studied her across the desk. "I want the truth. Why did you do all this?" "I told you. Not the version you gave me in the garden. The real reason." She was silent for a long moment, then, "Because if I didn't, I would have died here." The bluntness shocked him. "Not physically," she continued quietly, "but inside. This place when I arrived was a tomb. Cold, empty, hostile. The staff hated me because of who I was, what everyone said I was. They barely spoke to me. Mr. Graves made it clear I was an unwelcome burden. I had nothing to do, nowhere to go, no purpose at all. Just existing in a gray house, in a gray land with gray people who wished I would disappear." She looked up, and for the first time he saw real emotion in her eyes. "I couldn't survive that. I tried for weeks, just sitting in my room, reading the same books over and over, eating meals alone, sleeping through days because there was nothing to wake up for. I was drowning, so I made a choice. I could let this place kill me slowly, or I could fight for something better. So you started gardening. I started talking to people, learning their names, asking about their families, their problems. I found out the gardener's wife was sick, so I helped care for her. The cook's daughter needed reading lessons, so I taught her. Small things, human things. And slowly, very slowly, they stopped seeing me as the disgraced woman from London and started seeing me as someone who cared. She paused, choosing words carefully. The gardens came later. I noticed how much food we were importing when we could grow our own. I saw the orchards dying from neglect when they could be producing fruit. I realized we had resources, land, labor, knowledge, that were being wasted. So I proposed changes, not as the Duchess giving orders, but as someone offering solutions. And they listened. Not because they had to, but because the ideas made sense. Adrian leaned back, processing this. It was a survival strategy, a calculated effort to create tolerable conditions in an intolerable situation. He could respect that, even if it complicated his desire to see her suffer. And the expenditures, he asked? The accounts Graves mentioned? Minimal, seeds, tools, some repair materials. I kept detailed records. You can review them if you wish. Most of the labor was voluntary. People wanted to see this place improve. She met his gaze steadily. Your estate is more valuable now than it was 6 months ago. The gardens will produce food that reduces costs. The improvements make the manor more habitable, which means you could actually use it if you wanted. I haven't wasted your money, Your Grace. I've invested it. It was a good argument. Too good. Adrian stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the moorland stretched endlessly under a darkening sky. Beautiful in its harshness. Unforgiving. Exactly like the situation he'd created. You're very clever, he said without turning. Turning your prison into a home, making your jailers into allies. Building something I'd have a hard time tearing down without looking cruel. That wasn't my intention. Wasn't it? He turned to face her. You knew I'd eventually hear about this. You knew I'd come. And you knew that when I arrived, I'd find something so improved that destroying it would make me the villain instead of you. Color rose in her cheeks. You think I did all this to manipulate you? Didn't you? She stood, and for the first time since he'd arrived, her composure cracked. You sent me to a dying house in the middle of nowhere with servants who despised me and told me to exist there as punishment for crimes I... She stopped abruptly, breathing hard. I did what I had to do to survive. If that makes me manipulative in your eyes, so be it. But don't pretend you gave me any other choice. Crimes you what? Adrian stepped closer, suddenly intent. Finish that sentence. It doesn't matter. Finish it. Why? Her eyes flashed. Would you believe me if I said I didn't do what everyone thinks I did? Would you listen if I tried to defend myself? Or would you just assume it was more manipulation, more lies, more proof that I'm exactly the villain you need me to be? The pain in her voice was raw, real, too real. Adrian felt his certainty waver, just for a moment before he crushed the doubt. You confessed, he said coldly. You admitted your role in the scandal. Your own lawyer confirmed it. Yes. The fight drained out of her as quickly as it had appeared. I did. Then there's nothing to discuss. She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw something die in her expression. Whatever fragile hope she'd been carrying, that maybe, somehow, he might listen, extinguished completely. No, she said softly. There's nothing to discuss. You're right, Your Grace. As always. She curtsied and turned to leave. Lydia. She stopped but didn't turn around. Why did you thank me? That night in London when you got in the carriage. You thanked me. Why? Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. Because whatever you think of me, however much you hate me, you kept me alive. In a world that wanted me destroyed, you gave me a name that meant survival. Even if it came with cruelty, it was more than I had before. More than I deserved, according to everyone else. She paused. So yes, I thanked you, and I meant it. She left before he could respond. Adrian stood alone in the library, surrounded by improvements he hadn't authorized and questions he couldn't answer. Crimes What had she been about to say? It didn't matter. It couldn't matter. She was guilty. Everyone knew it. She had confessed. And yet, he spent a sleepless night in chambers that were far more comfortable than he remembered. And in the morning, he did something he hadn't planned on. He stayed. 3 weeks passed. Adrian told himself he needed to supervise the estate, review the accounts, ensure Lydia wasn't overstepping further. But the truth was more complicated. He was watching her. Every day she rose early and worked. She taught reading to tenant children in the mornings. She helped in the kitchens during meal preparation. She walked the grounds with the gardener, planning future improvements. She sat with the elderly housekeeper who was going blind, reading to her by the fire. She never asked Adrian for anything, never sought his attention or approval, never mentioned their confrontation in the library. She just existed, quietly building her small world within his larger one. And people loved her for it. The staff stopped tensing when she entered a room. The tenants greeted her warmly when she visited their farms. Children ran to her with flowers and stories. Even Mr. Graves, perpetually sour Mr. Graves, grudgingly admitted that morale had improved significantly under her influence. It drove Adrian to distraction, because this wasn't how it was supposed to work. She was supposed to be miserable, isolated, broken by the weight of what she'd done and the punishment she'd earned. Instead, she was thriving. No, not thriving. Surviving with such grace that it looked like thriving. There was a difference. Adrian saw it in moments when she thought no one was watching, the way her smile faded when she was alone, the exhaustion in her posture at day's end, the sadness that lingered in her eyes even when she laughed with the children. She was performing survival, making it look easy when it clearly wasn't. Why? The question haunted him. One afternoon, Adrian found her in the library again, his library, technically, though she'd clearly claimed it during his absence. She sat in the window seat, reading, afternoon light turning her hair to dark gold. She looked up when he entered, marked her page, and moved to leave. "Stay," he said. She hesitated, then settled back into the window seat, hands folded, waiting. Adrian poured himself a drink, whiskey this time, northern and harsh. How long did it take to win them over? Months. She understood immediately who he meant. The cook was first. I helped her when her daughter fell ill. After that, word spread that I wasn't whatever they'd expected. And they just forgave you? Forgot what you supposedly did? No. She shook her head. They still know who I am, what I'm accused of, but they judge me based on what they see here, not what they heard about London. She searched for words. It's different when someone helps your child or fixes your roof or remembers your name. Easier to see them as human instead of monster. Is that what you are? Human instead of monster? She met his gaze. What do you think, Your Grace? He didn't answer, couldn't, because increasingly he didn't know. The woman society had painted, scheming, manipulative, cold, didn't match what he saw here. That woman wouldn't spend hours teaching tenant children to read, wouldn't work until her hands blistered, wouldn't cry quietly in the garden when she thought no one could see. But confessions didn't lie. Evidence didn't lie. Did it? Tell me about the scandal, he said abruptly. Your version, what you think happened. Lydia looked at him for a long moment, surprise and wariness mixing in her expression. Why? Because I want to hear it. You won't believe me. Probably not. Tell me anyway. She was silent so long he thought she'd refuse, then quietly, Your father was a good man, better than people knew. When my parents died and left me penniless, he took me in, not out of obligation, but because he remembered my father from the war. They'd served together. He wanted to honor that. Adrian nodded. This much he knew. I lived at Blackmore House for 5 years. I helped manage the household because I wanted to be useful, to earn my place. Your father trusted me. He talked to me about things, his fears, his regrets, including his business dealings. She paused, choosing words carefully. Some of those dealings were questionable, not illegal, not at first, but risky, aggressive. He made promises he couldn't keep, signed contracts that were borderline fraudulent. He knew it. He hated himself for it, but he was trying to maintain the estate, to keep the Blackmore legacy alive, and he convinced himself the ends justified the means. So you're saying he was guilty? I'm saying he made mistakes. Her voice was firm. Mistakes that certain people exploited after his death. People who wanted to destroy the Blackmore name and saw an opportunity in those questionable dealings. Who? She looked away. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Who orchestrated the scandal? Your Grace, please. Who, Lydia? She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were filled with pain. People you trusted, people close to your family. That's all I can say. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give without... She stopped. Without making things worse. Worse than being exiled and hated? Yes. She stood, agitated now. You want the truth? Fine. The scandal was real, but it was exaggerated, manipulated, weaponized by people with their own agendas. Your father's actual crimes were minor compared to what he was accused of. But once the accusation machine started, it didn't stop. Evidence was manufactured, testimony was bought, and She broke off, trembling. You what? I made a choice. Her voice was barely audible. I could let the machine destroy everything. You, the estate, everyone connected to the Blackmore name, or I could give it a target it would accept. Someone whose reputation didn't matter. Someone disposable. The implications hit Adrian like a physical blow. You confessed to protect... me? I confessed because it was the only way to stop the investigation from going further. The authorities had their villain, the scheming ward who manipulated a dying old man. Once they had that story, they stopped looking for more. The investors got their scapegoat, society got their scandal, and you... She looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. You got to walk away. Wounded, yes. Damaged, certainly, but alive. Still a duke. Still able to rebuild. Adrian's mind reeled. It couldn't be true. It was too convenient, too perfectly exculpatory. And yet, if this is real, he said slowly, why didn't you defend yourself? Why accept complete ruin? Because defending myself meant exposing everything. The people involved, the real extent of your father's dealings, the connections to powerful families who would have crushed you rather than be exposed. My ruin saved a dozen other people from investigation. My confession closed a door that would have destroyed everyone. That's insane. That's survival. She wiped her eyes angrily. You think I wanted this? You think I chose disgrace and exile because it sounded fun? I did what I had to do to protect the people I cared about, including you, whether you believe it or not. I don't believe it. But his voice lacked conviction. I know. She moved toward the door. That's why I didn't tell you before. That's why I'll never be able to prove it. The people who did this made sure of that. Wait. She stopped. Names. Give me names. If you're telling the truth, give me someone to investigate. Lydia turned, and her expression was heartbreaking, filled with longing and resignation in equal measure. Your Grace, if I give you names, you'll go after them, and they'll destroy you. They're powerful enough to fabricate a scandal that ruined a dukedom. They're powerful enough to bury you if you challenge them. She shook her head. I didn't sacrifice everything just to watch you get crushed anyway. Let me make that decision. No. Her voice was firm. I've lost my name, my family, my future. I won't lose the one thing I managed to save, you. Even if you hate me for it. She left. Adrian stood in the library, surrounded by the comfortable silence of books and firelight, and felt his world shifting on its axis. It couldn't be true. It couldn't. But what if it was? That night, fever struck. Adrian woke to shouting and running footsteps. He threw on a robe and emerged to find the household in chaos, servants rushing with linens and hot water, Mr. Graves issuing frantic orders. What's happening? The Duchess, your Grace. Mrs. Crawford, the housekeeper, looked terrified. She collapsed during evening rounds. High fever. We've sent for the doctor, but he's hours away. Adrian was moving before she finished, taking stairs 3 at a time. Lydia's room was a scene of controlled panic. Maids worked with quiet efficiency, changing linens, applying cool compresses. And in the bed, small and pale and frighteningly still, was Lydia. Her skin was flushed with fever. Her breathing came in shallow gasps. Her eyes were closed, but she moved restlessly, caught in the grip of whatever sickness had taken her. Adrian's heart clenched with sudden, unexpected terror. How long has she been like this? Since this evening, Your Grace. She complained of feeling unwell at dinner, but insisted on making her rounds. She collapsed in the tenant's cottage while visiting the sick child. Of course she did. Of course she pushed herself past breaking to help someone else. The doctor, hours away at minimum. The roads are bad. Adrian moved to the bedside. Up close, Lydia looked even worse, lips dry and cracked, dark circles under her eyes, trembling with chills despite the blankets piled on her. Lydia. He touched her forehead, burning hot. Can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed. Your Grace? Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry. The work. I'll finish tomorrow. Forget the work. You're sick. You need to rest. Can't. She tried to sit up and failed. The children, lessons. Mrs. Crawford needs. The children will wait. Mrs. Crawford can manage. You need. No. Sudden tears spilled down her cheeks. No, I have to be useful. If I'm not useful, if I'm not helping, then I'm just the ruined woman, just the burden. Can't be burden. Have to work. Have to prove. She dissolved into incoherent mumbling, lost to the fever. Adrian felt something crack in his chest. Even now, even sick, delirious, barely conscious, she was fighting to justify her existence, fighting to prove she deserved the space she occupied, fighting against the identity he had forced on her, useless, worthless, deserving only of punishment. Mrs. Crawford. His voice was rough. I want every available servant working to bring this fever down. Cool water, compresses, whatever the doctor would recommend. And when he arrives, he gets whatever he needs. Money is no object. Understood? Yes, Your Grace. Adrian pulled a chair to the bedside and sat. He told himself he was staying out of responsibility. She was technically his wife, technically his problem. But as the hours crawled past and Lydia burned with fever, crying out in her delirium, he knew it was more than that. Because the things she said in her fever dreams destroyed him. Didn't mean to hurt anyone. Tried to protect. Please understand. Thomas said it was the only way. Said you'd be safe if I just took the blame. Love him too much to watch him destroyed. Even if he hates me. Worth it if he survives. Sorry, Papa. Broke my promise. Couldn't keep the family safe. Failed everyone. Each fragment was a knife. Thomas. She mentioned Thomas repeatedly, her brother. The man who had arranged this marriage. The man who had been so eager to be rid of her. What had Thomas said? What had he made her do? And that other confession, whispered in the darkest hours of night. Love him too much. Him. Who? But Adrian already knew. In the space between heartbeats, in the terrible silence of a sick room at midnight, he knew. She meant him. Lydia, ruined, exiled, punished Lydia, loved him. Had loved him enough to destroy herself to save him. The realization hit like thunder. No, he whispered. No, that's not. You can't. But she was past hearing, lost in fever and memory and pain. Dawn broke over the moors, gray and cold. The doctor arrived, examined Lydia, prescribed treatments. She'll recover, he said finally. But she's exhausted, Your Grace. This isn't just illness. It's complete physical depletion. She's been working herself to collapse for months. Why? The doctor gave him a look of surprised pity. Surely you know, Your Grace. She's trying to earn her place, to prove she deserves to exist here. I've seen it before. People in impossible situations who work themselves to death trying to justify their survival. He left instructions and departed. Adrian remained. And as Lydia slept, finally peaceful, fever-breaking, he made a decision. If what she'd said in her delirium was true, if there was even a chance it was true, he needed to know. He needed to find out what really happened 18 months ago. He needed to learn who had orchestrated the scandal that destroyed his family. And he needed to discover whether the woman he'd married out of vengeance was actually the woman who had saved him, even at the cost of everything she had. The storm that had brought them together was about to break wide open, and nothing would ever be the same. Adrian left Ashford Manor at dawn, while Lydia still slept under the doctor's care. He didn't say goodbye. He couldn't. Not when every fevered confession still echoed in his mind. Not when doubt had finally cracked through 18 months of certainty, like ice breaking under spring thaw. The ride back to London was brutal. 3 days of hard travel through country that grew progressively more civilized and felt progressively more hostile. Because with every mile, Adrian's suspicion hardened into purpose, and purpose demanded answers he wasn't sure he wanted to find. Thomas Vance. That name haunted him. Lydia had mentioned him repeatedly in her delirium. Thomas said it was the only way. And the more Adrian thought about it, the less sense the original story made. Thomas had been so eager to arrange the marriage, so desperate to be rid of his sister. He'd practically salivated at the settlement money, couldn't wait to sign the papers and collect his payment. Why? If Lydia was truly guilty, if she'd truly helped orchestrate fraud, why would Thomas want her gone so badly? Wouldn't he want to protect her, shield her, at least extract some benefit from their partnership? Unless there had been no partnership, unless Thomas had needed Lydia silenced, controlled, removed from any position where she could speak freely. The possibility made Adrian's blood run cold. He reached London on the third day and went directly to his solicitor's office. Not Pemberton, who had arranged the marriage, but a different firm entirely. Older, more discreet. Specialists in investigation rather than contracts. Your Grace, Mr. Whitmore rose from behind a desk piled with documents, surprise evident on his aged face. This is unexpected. How can I be of service? I need you to investigate a scandal. Adrian sat without waiting for invitation. The Blackmore fraud case from 18 months ago. Every detail, every witness, every piece of evidence. I want to know who benefited, who paid for testimony, who had motive to destroy my family. Whitmore's eyebrows rose. Your Grace, that case was thoroughly investigated by the authorities. The authorities accepted the first plausible story they were handed. I want the truth. Adrian leaned forward. And I want you to start with Thomas Vance. Financial records, business dealings, associates, everything. Thomas Vance? Whitmore looked genuinely confused. The dissolute younger brother? Your Grace, he was barely involved in the case. His sister took all the blame. Exactly. Why? Understanding dawned in the old solicitor's eyes. You think she was covering for him? I think someone orchestrated the entire scandal, and I think Thomas Vance knows who. I need proof. Whitmore was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. This will be expensive, Your Grace, and potentially dangerous. If powerful people were involved, I don't care about expense or danger. I care about truth. Adrian stood. How long? A month, perhaps 2 if we're thorough. You have 3 weeks. After that, I'm going after Thomas Vance myself, with or without evidence. Your Grace, 3 weeks, Whitmore. Adrian left before the solicitor could argue further. For 2 weeks, Adrian existed in a state of tense waiting. He attended social functions mechanically, rebuilt business connections without enthusiasm, and thought constantly about Ashford Manor, about Lydia recovering from fever, about everything she'd whispered in delirium. Reports arrived periodically from Ashford, brief notes from Mrs. Crawford assuring him the Duchess was improving, resuming light duties, asking about his return. He didn't respond, didn't know what to say. How could he face her again until he knew the truth? Then, on the 15th day, Whitmore sent an urgent message. Come immediately, we found something. Adrian arrived at the office to find Whitmore surrounded by documents, maps, ledgers, a paper fortress of evidence that had clearly consumed every waking hour. Tell me. Adrian's voice was rough. Whitmore gestured to a chair. Sit, Your Grace. This is extensive. For the next 2 hours, Whitmore laid out a conspiracy so intricate, so carefully constructed, that Adrian felt physically ill listening to it. Thomas Vance hadn't just known about the scandal, he'd orchestrated it. Working with a consortium of investors who wanted to acquire Blackmore properties at bankruptcy prices, Thomas had systematically built a case against his own sister and Adrian's father. He'd forged documents, paid off witnesses, manufactured evidence. He'd used his position as Lydia's brother to access information about Blackmore finances, then twisted that information into proof of fraud. Why would Lydia confess? Adrian demanded. If she was innocent, why accept blame? Whitmore pulled out another document, a letter, yellowed with age, written in Lydia's hand. Because Thomas blackmailed her. Whitmore's voice was grim. We found correspondence between them. Thomas told Lydia that if she didn't confess, he would ensure the investigation expanded to include you directly. He had fabricated evidence, false contracts with your signature, forged letters indicating your involvement. If Lydia fought the charges, Thomas would release that evidence and destroy you completely. Adrian read the letter with shaking hands. Thomas, please, there must be another way. You're asking me to ruin myself, to accept crimes I didn't commit. How can you do this to your own sister? And Thomas's response, cold and calculating. Sister, you have always been too sentimental. This is business. The consortium needs a scapegoat, either you or the Duke. I've already sold them your confession. If you refuse, I release the documents implicating Blackmore directly, and he hangs for fraud. Your choice is simple. Your reputation or his life. She chose me. Adrian's voice was barely audible. She destroyed herself to save me from a crime I didn't commit. Yes, Your Grace. And Thomas? Where is he now? Whitmore's expression darkened. That's where this gets worse. After collecting his settlement from you, Thomas used the money to buy into the very consortium that orchestrated the scandal. He's now a partner in Westmont Holdings, one of the largest property investment firms in England. Quite wealthy, quite respectable. Rage exploded through Adrian's chest. Thomas had destroyed his own sister, extracted payment from the man she'd sacrificed herself to save, and then used that blood money to build a fortune. The other investors, Adrian said through gritted teeth. Who else was involved? Whitmore hesitated. Your Grace, these are powerful men. Lord Ashworth, Sir Gerald Pembroke, the Honorable Richard Hartley. Adrian recognized every name. They were titans of London society, men who could destroy reputations with a whisper, ruin businesses with a letter, buy and sell influence like commodities. They fabricated a scandal to acquire my properties at bankruptcy prices. Yes, and they would have succeeded completely if you hadn't managed to salvage what you did. As it stands, they acquired several Blackmore estates through forced sales, made fortunes, and faced no consequences. Whitmore paused. Your Grace, if you go after these men, they will fight back. They have resources, connections. I don't care. Adrian stood, mind racing. Can you prove it? Can you document everything you've just told me? Some of it, yes. The forged documents, the paid witnesses. We have testimony from several who are now willing to recant, particularly the ones Thomas didn't pay as promised. The letter exchange between Thomas and Lydia we obtained from a former household servant. But direct evidence connecting the consortium members? Whitmore shook his head. Thomas was careful to insulate them. We can prove he orchestrated it, but proving they commissioned him is more difficult. Then we start with Thomas. If he thinks he's protected by powerful friends, we disabuse him of that notion. Adrian moved toward the door. Where can I find him? Your Grace, confronting him directly. Where? Whitmore sighed. He keeps offices at Westmont Holdings, Cheapside, but I strongly advise against. Adrian was already gone. He found Thomas Vance in an expensive office overlooking the London streets, dressed in fine clothes bought with blood money, reviewing investment portfolios like he was a legitimate businessman instead of a parasite who'd devoured his own sister. Thomas looked up when Adrian entered unannounced, and the color drained from his face. Your Grace. He stood quickly, false smile plastered on. What an unexpected... Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides and slammed Thomas against the wall, forearm across his throat. You destroyed her. Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. Your own sister. You fabricated evidence, blackmailed her into confessing, and sold her to me like she was property. And then you took my money and built this. He gestured around the expensive office with his free hand. Thomas gasped for air, eyes bulging. I don't know what... Don't lie to me. Adrian pressed harder. I have the letters, the forged documents, testimony from witnesses you failed to pay. I know everything. Thomas's expression shifted from fear to calculation. Even choking, he was scheming. Proof, he wheezed. You have no proof that would stand in court. And if you did, you'd have to expose Lydia's involvement, her knowledge of your father's actual dealings. She wasn't completely innocent, Your Grace. She knew things. If you push this, her reputation gets destroyed all over again. It was a desperate bluff, but Adrian saw the trap immediately. Thomas was right. Exposing the conspiracy meant re-examining the original scandal. And even if Lydia was exonerated of fraud, her connection to questionable dealings would be scrutinized. Society would tear her apart all over again, asking why she hadn't spoken up sooner, questioning every choice she'd made. Thomas saw the hesitation and smiled, even with Adrian's arm crushing his windpipe. You can't win this, he gasped. The men I work with, they own judges, magistrates, newspaper editors. They'll bury you if you challenge them. And Lydia? She'll be collateral damage. Again. Adrian released him, stepping back. Thomas rubbed his throat, confidence returning. Be smart, Your Grace. You got your revenge. You married her, sent her away, made her miserable. Take the win and move on. Made her miserable? Adrian's voice was soft, dangerous. Is that what you think I did? Isn't it? Thomas straightened his jacket. Exiled to Northumberland, no allowance, complete isolation. Sounds like misery to me. She built gardens. The words came out before Adrian could stop them. She restored a dying manor. She taught children to read and helped sick tenants and created something beautiful from the wasteland I sent her to, because that's who she is, someone who survives, who builds, who sacrifices everything for people who don't deserve her, including you. Thomas stared at him. You sound like you actually care about her. Did he? Adrian didn't answer. Couldn't. She loved you, you know. Thomas's voice turned cruel. Even when I was setting up the scandal, even when I told her what she'd have to do, she kept saying, but Adrian will be safe, right? Promise me Adrian will be protected. Pathetic, really. All that devotion for a man who would eventually marry her as punishment. Something in Adrian's chest cracked open. Why? The question tore out of him. Why destroy your own sister for money? Thomas laughed, bitter, ugly. Because she was always the good one. Always the one people loved, trusted, admired. Our parents doted on her. Your father preferred her company to mine. Everyone thought she was so perfect, so selfless. His voice turned venomous. I wanted to prove she wasn't. I wanted to tear down that pedestal and watch her fall. And the money? He shrugged. That was just compensation for years of living in her shadow. Adrian had dealt with cruelty before, with greed, with ruthlessness, with calculated evil. But this petty, spiteful destruction of someone good simply because they were good, this was beyond his comprehension. You're going to confess, Adrian said quietly. I'm not. You are. Because if you don't, I will make it my life's mission to destroy you. I don't care how long it takes or what it costs. I will tear apart every business dealing, every investment, every relationship you've built. And when I'm done, you'll have nothing. Thomas's smile was confident. You'd have to prove I did something wrong first. Good luck with that. I have your letters to Lydia. Letters that could be interpreted many ways. Letters that don't explicitly incriminate the consortium. Thomas moved back to his desk, secure in his safety. Face it, Your Grace, you have suspicions, not evidence. And suspicions don't hold up in court, especially against men with the resources to fight back. He was right. Adrian knew he was right. But there was another way. Then I won't use the courts, Adrian said. I'll use society. Thomas frowned. What? Society destroyed Lydia based on accusations and innuendo. No trial, no defense, just collective judgment that she was guilty. If that's the standard, then it works both ways. Adrian moved toward the door. I'm going to tell everyone what you did. Every club, every dinner party, every social gathering in London. I'm going to share those letters, recite that testimony, and let society draw its own conclusions about Thomas Vance, the man who sold his sister for profit. They won't believe you. They'll believe enough. That's how scandal works, isn't it? Once the whispers start, once doubt takes root, it spreads like disease. You taught me that when you destroyed my family. Adrian paused at the door. I wonder how your consortium partners will react when their names get associated with yours in all those whispers. When investment opportunities dry up because no one wants to be connected to the man who betrayed his own blood. Color drained from Thomas's face. You're bluffing. Am I? You said it yourself. I already got my revenge on Lydia. I have nothing left to lose. But you? Adrian smiled coldly. You have everything to lose. All that respectability, all that wealth, all those powerful friends who'll drop you the moment you become a liability. If you do this, Lydia suffers too. The scandal gets reopened. The scandal reopens with a new villain. You. And Lydia becomes what she always was, the victim who sacrificed herself to protect others. Adrian opened the door. You have 24 hours to decide. Confess publicly, and I'll ensure the consortium stays out of it. Keep silent, and I burn it all down, starting with you. He left Thomas standing in his expensive office, surrounded by wealth built on betrayal, finally understanding what it felt like to be trapped. Adrian didn't go home. Instead, he went to the one place in London where truth mattered more than power, the offices of the Westminster Chronicle, the newspaper that had broken the original Blackmore scandal. The editor, Marcus Reed, was a bulldog of a man who'd made a career exposing corruption. He listened to Adrian's story with shrewd eyes, occasionally interrupting with sharp questions. When Adrian finished, Reed leaned back in his chair. You realize what you're asking? Going after Westmont Holdings means going after some of the most powerful men in England. I realize. And you have proof? Enough to start asking questions, enough to make people doubt. Isn't that how this works? Reed smiled grimly. Yes, but it's a dangerous game, Your Grace. These men don't fight fair. Neither do I. Not anymore. Reed studied him for a long moment. Why now? Why not 18 months ago when it happened? Because 18 months ago, I thought I knew the truth. I thought Lydia Vance was guilty and deserved everything she got. Adrian's voice was rough. I was wrong, and now I need to make it right. Even if it costs you? Especially if it costs me. She sacrificed everything to save me from a crime I didn't commit. The least I can do is sacrifice my comfort to give her back her name. Reed nodded slowly. I'll need to verify everything independently. Interview witnesses, examine documents, build an airtight case. This isn't something I can print based solely on your word, Duke or not. I understand. How long? 2 weeks, maybe 3. You have one. Thomas Vance and his partners have had 18 months of peace. That ends now. The next week was a blur of activity. Reed's journalists fanned out across London, interviewing former servants, tracking down paid witnesses, examining financial records. Adrian provided everything Whitmore had uncovered, then went hunting for more. He found a former clerk at Westmont Holdings who'd been dismissed for questioning irregular practices, a maid who'd worked in Thomas Vance's household and overheard damning conversations, a junior investor who'd been pushed out when he objected to the consortium's methods. Each piece of testimony added to the growing picture of systematic fraud and manipulation. And then, on the 6th day, Thomas Vance cracked. He appeared at Blackmore House unannounced, looking haggard and desperate. I'll confess, he said without preamble. I'll sign a statement admitting everything, the forgeries, the blackmail, all of it. Just keep the consortium out of it. Adrian regarded him coldly from behind his desk. Why the change of heart? Because you were right. The whispers started. My partners are distancing themselves. Investments are falling through. Thomas's voice was bitter. They're going to sacrifice me anyway. Better to get ahead of it and negotiate terms. You don't get to negotiate. Please. The words seemed to physically pain Thomas. I'll give you whatever you want. Full confession, public apology to Lydia, financial restitution. You can't pay back what you took from her. I know, but I can try. Thomas pulled out a document, already prepared, already signed. Full confession, names, dates, methods, everything except the consortium members. In exchange, you let me leave England quietly. I have passage booked to America. I'll go, I'll never return, and Lydia gets her vindication. Adrian took the document and read it. It was everything, a complete admission of guilt, exonerating Lydia entirely, laying out the entire conspiracy in damning detail. Why should I let you run instead of facing justice? Because justice means a trial. A trial means the consortium fights back. They'll drag Lydia through hell all over again, tear apart every aspect of her life, make her suffering public entertainment. Thomas's voice was quiet now. Let me go, and it ends clean. Lydia is exonerated, the story dies, and she gets to live in peace. Isn't that what you want? It was a devil's bargain. Let Thomas escape to save Lydia from further trauma. Adrian thought about her, fevered and delirious, still trying to justify her existence even while dying. Thought about how she'd react to a public trial, to having every private pain exposed for society's consumption. She'd endure it, of course. She endured everything. But she shouldn't have to. One condition, Adrian said finally, you transfer all assets acquired from the Blackmore scandal to Lydia. Properties, investments, everything. She gets the wealth you stole. That's my entire fortune. That's my price. Take it or face trial. Thomas closed his eyes. Fine. I'll have my solicitor draw up the transfers. No, my solicitor draws them up. You sign them. Today. 2 hours later, Thomas Vance signed away everything he'd built on his sister's ruin. Then he left London on the evening train, heading for a port and a ship that would carry him far from England and consequences. Adrian watched him go and felt no satisfaction. Because the real monster, the consortium that had commissioned the destruction, would escape unpunished. Reed's investigation had confirmed their involvement, but proving it in court was nearly impossible. They'd insulated themselves too well, used Thomas as their instrument while keeping their own hands clean. Sometimes the powerful didn't face justice. But Lydia would get her name back. That had to be enough. The Westminster Chronicle published the story 3 days later. The headline screamed across every newsstand in London. Blackmore. Scandal exposed. Innocent woman destroyed by brothers' greed. The article laid out everything. Thomas's confession, the forged evidence, the blackmail, Lydia's forced confession to save Adrian. It painted her as a tragic hero who'd sacrificed herself to protect the man she loved. London society devoured it with horrified fascination. Within hours, the narrative had completely reversed. Lydia Vance, previously the scheming villainess, became the martyred saint. Society matrons who'd cut her from invitation lists now wept over her suffering. Men who'd called her a Jezebel now praised her courage. The same people who'd destroyed her now rushed to embrace her vindication. Adrian found it nauseating, because where were these people 18 months ago? Where was this compassion, this understanding, when Lydia needed it most? But it didn't matter. What mattered was that Lydia's name was restored. She could return to society if she wanted, could reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. The question was, would she want to? Adrian left London that same day, riding north toward Ashford Manor with a copy of the newspaper and a heart full of dread, because he'd given Lydia back her name, but he'd taken everything else, her peace, her safety, her carefully built life in Northumberland, and he still didn't know if she'd forgive him for it. He arrived at Ashford 3 days later, just as another storm rolled across the moors. The manor looked different in the rain, more solid somehow, more permanent. The gardens Lydia had built stood strong against the weather, testament to foundations laid with care and vision. Mrs. Crawford met him at the door, surprise evident on her face. Your Grace, we didn't expect you. Where is she? The Duchess? In the library, I believe. Your Grace, has something happened? There are rumors from London. I need to speak with her, alone. Adrian found Lydia exactly where Mrs. Crawford said, curled in the window seat with a book, looking healthier than when he'd left but still fragile. She looked up when he entered, and her expression shifted from surprise to wariness. Your Grace, I didn't know you'd returned. He crossed the room and held out the newspaper. She took it, confused, and started reading. Adrian watched her face as she absorbed the headline, the article, the complete vindication, watched as color drained from her cheeks, as her hands began to shake, as tears filled her eyes. How? Her voice was barely a whisper. I investigated. I found proof. Thomas confessed. Adrian kept his voice steady with effort. It's over, Lydia. The truth is out. Your name is restored. You're free. She stared at the newspaper like it might disappear. Thomas confessed? He admitted he... She couldn't finish. Everything. The forgery, the blackmail, the consortium, all of it. Adrian paused. He's left England. But before he went, he transferred all his assets to you. Properties, investments, everything he stole. It's yours now. I don't want it. The words came out fierce. I don't want anything that came from what he did. It's yours anyway. Do with it what you will. Keep it. Give it away. Burn it. But it belongs to you, not him. Lydia set down the newspaper with shaking hands. Why? Why did I investigate? Why did I expose him? Why did you care? She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. You sent me here as punishment. You made it clear you hated me. Why would you risk everything to... Because you were right. Adrian's voice broke. What you said during your fever, about sacrificing yourself to save me, about loving me enough to destroy yourself, it was true. All of it. She went very still. I didn't believe you at first, Adrian continued. I thought it was manipulation, another scheme. But I investigated anyway, and I found the letters, the evidence, the whole ugly truth. And I realized that He stopped, forcing himself to say it. I destroyed an innocent woman. I punished you for having the courage to save my life. I married you to make you suffer when you'd already suffered more than anyone should endure. You didn't know. I didn't want to know. That's worse. Adrian moved closer. You tried to tell me, multiple times. And I refused to listen because I was too consumed by my own pain, my own rage. I needed someone to blame, and you were there, so I blamed you. For everything. Lydia wiped her eyes. What happens now? The question hung between them, enormous and terrifying. You're vindicated, Adrian said carefully. Society knows the truth. You can return to London, reclaim your position. I'll ensure you have everything you need, money, property, protection. You're free, Lydia, completely free. Free, she repeated softly. Then quietly, from you? The question was a knife. If that's what you want, I can arrange an annulment, a separation, whatever you need. You've sacrificed enough. You don't owe me anything. That's not what I asked. Her voice was stronger now. I asked if you want me gone. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who'd survived exile and illness and cruelty with her dignity intact, who'd built gardens in wasteland and kindness in hostility, who'd loved him enough to destroy herself and ask nothing in return. No, he said, the word tearing out of him. I don't want you gone. I want... He stopped, terrified of what he was about to admit. I want you to stay. I want to deserve you. I want the chance to make this into a real marriage instead of a punishment. Lydia stood, and for a terrible moment Adrian thought she would refuse, thought she would take the freedom he was offering and run from the man who'd hurt her. Instead, she crossed the space between them and slapped him. The crack echoed through the library. That's for the last 6 months, she said, voice shaking. For every cruel word, every cold dismissal, every moment you made me feel worthless. Adrian touched his stinging cheek. I deserved that. Yes, you did. She took a shuddering breath. And this is for investigating, for exposing Thomas, for giving me back my name when you didn't have to. She kissed him. It was soft, brief, salty, with tears. But it was real. When she pulled back, Adrian saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Hope. I don't want an annulment, Lydia said quietly. I don't want separation. I want... She stopped, gathering courage. I want the marriage we should have had from the beginning. Partnership, trust. Maybe, eventually, love. She paused. If you can forgive me for the lies I told, and I can forgive you for believing them. There's nothing to forgive. Adrian cupped her face gently. You saved my life. You sacrificed everything. The lies you told were mercy compared to the truth I ignored. Then we start over. Lydia managed a watery smile. Hello, Your Grace. I'm Lydia Blackmore. I build gardens and teach children, and apparently married a stubborn duke who's slower than granite to recognize the truth. Despite everything, Adrian laughed. Hello, Lydia. I'm Adrian. I'm an idiot who nearly destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him. Nearly, she agreed. But you stopped in time. Her smile faded. What about the consortium? The men who commissioned Thomas? Adrian's expression hardened. They'll escape legal consequences. They covered their tracks too well. But socially, they're damaged. Their names were in the article, their connection to Thomas exposed. They'll survive, but they'll never be as powerful again. And that's enough for you? It has to be. Because going after them further means dragging you through more pain, more scrutiny, more public exposure. And I won't do that to you, not again. Lydia looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Thank you. Outside, thunder rolled across the moors. Inside, two people who'd married as enemies stood in a library and chose to become something else, something better, something that might, with time and effort and forgiveness, become love. The storm that had brought them together was finally breaking, and in its wake, something new was beginning to grow. The storm that night was violent enough to shake the windows in their frames. Adrian and Lydia stood in the library as rain hammered the manor, neither quite sure what to do with the fragile new thing they'd just created. This tentative agreement to try again, to build something real from the wreckage of punishment and sacrifice. I should let you rest, Adrian said finally, though he made no move to leave. You're still recovering. I'm fine. Lydia's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her skirt. The fever broke days ago. I'm not fragile, Adrian. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and the sound of it, without the formal "Your Grace," struck him with unexpected force. No, he agreed quietly. You're not. You're the strongest person I've ever met, and I was too blind to see it. She looked away, color rising in her cheeks. Don't canonize me. I made choices too, chose to confess instead of fighting, chose to accept this marriage instead of running. I'm not blameless in how we got here. You chose survival in impossible circumstances. That's not blame, that's courage. Before Lydia could respond, rapid footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mrs. Crawford appeared in the doorway, breathless and agitated. Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but there are carriages approaching, multiple carriages. In this weather, it's most unusual. Adrian and Lydia exchanged glances. Who would travel to Ashford Manor in a storm? They found out 10 minutes later when the entrance hall filled with wet, road-weary visitors, and Adrian's stomach dropped. Lord Ashworth, Sir Gerald Pembroke, 3 other members of the consortium that had orchestrated the scandal. The men who'd destroyed the Blackmore name stood in his entrance hall, dripping rainwater onto the polished floor Lydia had restored, looking grim and determined. Your Grace! Lord Ashworth stepped forward, a silver-haired aristocrat whose pleasant face hid a mind sharp as steel. My apologies for arriving unannounced, but certain matters require immediate attention. Adrian moved instinctively to place himself between the men and Lydia. You're not welcome here. We're aware of that. We came anyway. Ashworth's gaze shifted to Lydia, something unreadable in his expression. Your Grace, the Duchess. How well you look. Lydia's face was pale but composed. Lord Ashworth, I'd say it's a pleasure, but we both know I'd be lying. A ghost of a smile touched Ashworth's mouth. Fair enough. Your Grace, we need to speak with you, privately. No. Adrian's voice was flat. Anything you have to say can be said in front of my wife. The word, wife, said with ownership and protection instead of contempt, seemed to surprise everyone, including Lydia. Ashworth sighed. Very well. Your Grace, your recent activities in London have created significant problems. The article in the Westminster Chronicle has damaged reputations, including ours. We're here to negotiate terms. Terms? Adrian laughed, harsh and cold. You orchestrated a fraud that destroyed my family, and now you want to negotiate? We want to contain the damage, Sir Gerald interjected, his face florid with anger or the cold, hard to tell. That article named us as Thomas Vance's associates. Our names are being dragged through scandal. You mean the way you dragged mine through scandal 18 months ago? That was business. Business? Lydia's voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone turned to stare at her. You call destroying innocent people business? You call forcing me to confess to crimes I didn't commit business? You were hardly innocent, Sir Gerald sneered. You knew about the old Duke's dealings. I knew my guardian was making risky investments. I didn't know you were planning to fabricate evidence and destroy his family for profit. Lydia stepped forward, and Adrian saw the strength that had built gardens from wasteland, had survived exile with dignity intact. I sacrificed myself to stop your investigation from going further, to protect Adrian from the manufactured evidence Thomas created at your commission. Don't you dare call that guilt. Ashworth raised a hand. Enough. This finger-pointing achieves nothing. He turned to Adrian. We have a proposal. We'll provide written statements exonerating you and the Duchess completely. Formal apologies, if you will. We'll also transfer certain properties back to Blackmore Holdings. In exchange, you publish a retraction. Admit the article was based on incomplete information. Clear our names. Absolutely not. Your Grace, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Reasonable would be pursuing criminal charges. Reasonable would be spending every pound I have to destroy you the way you destroyed us. Adrian's voice dropped dangerously. Instead, I'm giving you the same mercy you gave Lydia. None. You'll live with the whispers, the damaged reputations, the slow erosion of trust. You'll know what it feels like to be scorned by society you once commanded. The consortium members exchanged glances. Then Ashworth pulled out a document. We anticipated this response, so we prepared an alternative. He handed the paper to Adrian. Read it, carefully. Adrian scanned the document and felt rage explode through his veins. It was a sworn statement from a former Blackmore servant claiming Lydia had admitted her guilt privately, that she'd confessed to helping the old Duke orchestrate fraud deliberately. The statement was dated, signed, and witnessed. This is a forgery, Adrian said flatly. Prove it. Ashworth's voice was cold. We have a witness ready to testify. The story is plausible, far more plausible than a young woman sacrificing herself out of pure love. Society will believe it because society loves to believe the worst. You're threatening to destroy her reputation again. We're offering context. If you don't retract your accusations, we release this statement. The Westminster Chronicle will have to cover it, both sides of the story. And once doubt creeps back in, all your vindication crumbles. Lydia becomes the scheming woman again, and you become the fool who believed her lies. Silence filled the hall. Adrian looked at Lydia and saw the color draining from her face, saw her hands clenching to hide their trembling. She'd fought so hard to reclaim her name, and these men were threatening to destroy it all over again with manufactured evidence society would eagerly believe. Don't, Lydia whispered. Adrian, don't let them— How much? Adrian interrupted, looking at Ashworth. I'm sorry? How much to make this go away? You want money, I assume, properties, some tangible payment for your silence. Ashworth smiled. We want the retraction, the public clearing of our names, and a transfer of your Yorkshire holdings, particularly the coal mines. Sign those over and this unfortunate business ends quietly. Those mines are worth a fortune. So is your wife's reputation. Choose wisely, Your Grace. It was brilliant in a twisted way. They couldn't defend themselves legally, so they were using the same weapon they'd used 18 months ago. Society's eagerness to believe scandal. One false statement, one manufactured witness, and Lydia's vindication would collapse under the weight of renewed doubt. Adrian looked at the document, at the consortium members waiting with predatory patience, at Lydia standing pale and shaking. And he made a choice. No. Ashworth blinked. I'm sorry? No, I won't retract. I won't transfer properties. I won't give you a single thing you're demanding. Adrian handed the document back. Release your statement. Let your witness testify. Do your worst. Your Grace. Lydia's voice was anguished. They're bluffing, Adrian said quietly. Not about having a statement. I'm sure they paid someone to sign it, but about releasing it. He turned back to Ashworth. Because if you release that statement, I'll do something you're not prepared for. I'll make everything public, every detail, not just the scandal, but the conspiracy, the forged documents, the paid witnesses, the systematic fraud. I'll pursue criminal charges regardless of the cost or difficulty. You said yourself the evidence isn't strong enough. It's strong enough for a trial. Maybe not a conviction, but a trial means months of testimony, public scrutiny, newspaper coverage. Every sordid detail of your business practices exposed. Even if you're acquitted, the damage to your reputations will be catastrophic. Adrian smiled coldly. You built your power on staying invisible, on manipulating from shadows. I'll drag you into the light and let society watch you squirm. Sir Gerald stepped forward, face purple with rage. You arrogant fool! Careful. Adrian's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm the Duke of Blackmore in my own home. You're trespassing. One word from me and my staff will throw you out into the storm. Test me. The threat hung in the air. Ashworth studied Adrian with new wariness. You're willing to destroy yourself to hurt us? I'm willing to sacrifice everything to protect my wife. Because unlike you, I understand that some things matter more than power or profit or reputation. Adrian moved to stand beside Lydia, taking her hand. She sacrificed herself for me once. I won't let you make her do it again. Lydia's fingers tightened around his, and he felt the trembling finally still. This isn't over, Ashworth said quietly. Yes, it is. You came here expecting the same man you dealt with 18 months ago, angry, desperate, willing to accept any terms to protect his name. But I'm not that man anymore. Adrian gestured to the door. Leave, now, before I decide that criminal prosecution is worth the cost after all. The consortium members exchanged glances. They'd gambled on intimidation and lost. Slowly, reluctantly, they moved toward the door. Ashworth paused at the threshold. You're making a mistake, Your Grace. The only mistake I made was believing your lies for 18 months. I won't make it again. They left, carriages disappearing into the storm. Adrian stood with Lydia in the entrance hall as the sound of hoofbeats faded, both of them silent. That was incredibly stupid, Lydia said finally. Probably. They meant those threats. They have resources, connections. I know. They could still release that statement, still destroy everything. Lydia, Adrian turned to face her, let them try. I meant what I said. I will burn down everything I've built before I let them hurt you again. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You can't mean that. I do. You sacrificed yourself to save me. It's my turn to do the same. She kissed him then, not the brief, tentative touch from earlier, but something deeper, desperate and grateful and terrified all at once. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lydia whispered, We need a better plan than mutual destruction. Despite everything, Adrian laughed. Agreed. Any suggestions? Yes. She wiped her eyes, and he saw determination replacing fear. We stop playing defense. We go on offense. What do you mean? They think we're isolated up here, that we have no allies, no resources beyond your wealth. They're wrong. Lydia's voice grew stronger. The article vindicated me publicly. That means people, society, believes I'm innocent. We use that. We turn their own weapon against them. How? We go to London. Together. We attend every social function, every gathering. We show society a united front, a duke who believes in his wife and a duchess who survived hell with grace intact. We make ourselves so publicly, undeniably sympathetic that any attack on us becomes an attack on a love story society desperately wants to believe in. Adrian stared at her. That's actually brilliant. I learned from the best manipulators, remember? Her smile was bitter. Thomas and his consortium taught me how to use society as a weapon. Time to turn those lessons against them. They'll fight back, release their statement, spread counter-rumors. Let them. We'll be right there to refute everything in person, with witnesses and proof and the kind of public sincerity that's impossible to fake. Lydia gripped his hands. They win when we hide, when we let them control the narrative. But if we step into the light, if we claim our vindication loudly and publicly, they lose their power. Adrian considered it. It was risky. Exposing themselves to society meant exposing themselves to attack. But Lydia was right. Hiding in Northumberland gave the consortium freedom to spread whatever lies they wanted. When do we leave? Tomorrow. As soon as the storm breaks. Lydia paused. If you're sure, if you're truly ready to stand beside a woman society only just stopped calling a villain, I'm ready to stand beside my wife. Adrian pulled her close. And to make everyone see what I should have seen from the beginning, that you're extraordinary. They arrived in London 5 days later to find society in chaos. The vindication article had created factions. Half of London now believed Lydia was a wronged innocent, a tragic heroine worthy of sympathy and support. The other half remained suspicious, unconvinced that any woman would truly sacrifice herself so completely. The consortium had been working hard in Adrian's absence, spreading carefully worded doubts, suggesting that perhaps the truth was more complicated than the chronicle presented. Adrian and Lydia's arrival, together, publicly, at the height of the social season, forced everyone to choose a side. Their first appearance was at Lady Ashcroft's ball, one of the premier events of the season. The ballroom fell silent when they were announced. The Duke and Duchess of Blackmore. Every eye turned to watch them descend the stairs. Lydia wore midnight blue silk, elegant and understated. Her dark hair was swept up, revealing the graceful line of her neck. She looked every inch a duchess, poised, confident, beautiful. Adrian wore black, severe and formal, his hand possessively on Lydia's back as they entered. The silence stretched. Then Lady Ashcroft herself, a formidable dowager whose opinion could make or break reputations, crossed the ballroom floor and curtsied to Lydia. "Your Grace, how wonderful to see you restored to your rightful place. The injustice you suffered was unconscionable." It was a public declaration of support from one of society's most influential voices. The room exhaled. Conversations resumed. Other guests approached, offering congratulations and welcome. Not everyone was kind. Adrian saw the hostile stares, heard the whispered speculation. But Lydia faced it all with perfect composure, gracious and warm to supporters, coolly polite to detractors. They danced, the first time they'd ever danced together, and Adrian was acutely aware of every eye watching, every whisper analyzing their interaction. "They're trying to figure out if we're real," Lydia murmured. "If this is genuine or performance. What do you want them to think?" "The truth." She looked up at him, and Adrian saw vulnerability beneath the poise. That we were broken and were trying to mend. That we didn't start with love, but we might end with it. Might? Adrian pulled her closer. "I think we're already there." Her breath caught. "Adrian, I love you." The words felt strange and right all at once. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe in Northumberland, watching you build gardens from nothing. Maybe earlier when you thanked me for cruelty and meant it. Maybe it's been growing since that first night, and I was too stubborn to recognize it. But I love you, Lydia, and I want everyone in this room to know it." Tears glittered in her eyes. "You don't have to say that. I know. I'm saying it anyway because it's true." He spun her gently, and when she came back into his arms, he whispered, "I love you, and I'm going to keep saying it until you believe me." "I believe you," she whispered back, "and I love you too. Even when I shouldn't, even when it hurts, I love you." The music ended. They stood in the center of the ballroom, holding each other, oblivious to the watching crowd. And society saw exactly what Lydia wanted them to see, a love story worth believing in. The campaign continued for 3 weeks. Adrian and Lydia attended every function, accepted every invitation, made themselves constantly visible. They were charming, united, clearly devoted to each other. They told their story, carefully edited for public consumption, to anyone who asked. Lydia spoke at charity events, organized fundraising for orphans, used her newfound platform to help others. Adrian rebuilt business connections, made strategic investments, showed London he was a duke worth respecting. Together, they were formidable. The consortium fought back, but their weapons were suddenly ineffective. Whispered rumors bounced off the Blackmore's public unity. Manufactured doubts dissolved in the face of genuine affection. Society had decided Lydia was a heroine and Adrian a devoted husband, and narrative momentum was too strong to reverse. Then came the moment that changed everything. A formal dinner at Lord Pemberton's estate. Not Sir Gerald, but his cousin. A neutral party trying to mediate between factions. The dining room was filled with London's elite, including several consortium members. Halfway through the third course, Lord Ashworth stood. "I'd like to propose a toast," his voice carried across the room. "To the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore. May their happiness be as enduring as their devotion is evident." It seemed innocuous, a peace offering, perhaps. Adrian started to stand to acknowledge it. Then Ashworth continued, voice dripping false sympathy. And may the Duchess's past remain in the past, where it belongs. After all, we've all made mistakes we'd prefer forgotten. The implication was clear. Yes, Lydia was vindicated, but she still had shameful history worth burying. The room tensed. Adrian's hand tightened on his wine glass, but before he could respond, Lydia stood. "You're absolutely right, Lord Ashworth." Her voice was clear, carrying. "We've all made mistakes we'd prefer forgotten. For instance," she turned to address the entire table, "I'm sure you'd prefer people forgot how you conspired to defraud innocent investors through fabricated evidence and paid witnesses, how you commissioned Thomas Vance to destroy the Blackmore family so you could acquire properties at bankruptcy prices." Shocked silence. "Your Grace," Ashworth's face went pale. "You're making serious accusations." "Am I? Because I have documents, letters, testimony from several witnesses Thomas paid who were never compensated as promised and are now quite willing to discuss their involvement." Lydia's smile was cold. "I've been very busy these past weeks, Lord Ashworth. While you've been spreading subtle doubts about my character, I've been gathering evidence about yours." "You're bluffing." "I'm not." She gestured to Adrian, who pulled out a folder from inside his jacket, documents they'd deliberately brought to this dinner, waiting for exactly this confrontation. Financial records showing payments from Westmont Holdings to witnesses in the Blackmore case. Correspondence between Thomas Vance and consortium members discussing strategy. Testimony from the clerk who forged my signature on false confessions. Adrian distributed copies around the table. Guests grabbed them eagerly, reading with growing shock. "This is..." Sir Gerald stood, face apoplectic. "This is slander! Fabrication!" "Then sue me," Lydia said calmly. "Take me to court. Let's have a trial where all of this becomes public record, where newspapers cover every detail, where your entire conspiracy gets examined under oath." She paused. "Unless, of course, you'd prefer to avoid that scrutiny." The trap was perfect. If the consortium denied the allegations, they looked guilty. If they pursued legal action, they risked public trial and exposure. If they stayed silent, society would draw its own conclusions. Ashworth stared at Lydia with something approaching respect. "You've learned to play this game well, Your Grace." "I had excellent teachers. You destroyed me using society as a weapon. I'm simply returning the favor." "What do you want?" "Public apology. Formal written statements exonerating the Duke and myself completely, and a substantial donation to a charity of my choosing, let's say £50,000 from each consortium member, as penance." "That's outrageous." "That's justice." Lydia's voice was steel. "You took everything from me, my name, my reputation, my life. I'm taking a fraction back. Accept these terms, and this ends quietly. Refuse, and I publish everything, every document, every witness statement, every sordid detail of your conspiracy." The consortium members looked at each other. They were beaten, and they knew it. "We'll need time to consider," Ashworth began. "You have until morning." Adrian stood beside Lydia, united front complete. "After that, the documents go to every newspaper in London." The dinner dissolved into chaos as consortium members hurried away to consult lawyers, as other guests buzzed with scandal and excitement. Adrian and Lydia left together, stepping into the cool London night. "Did we just win?" Lydia asked quietly. "We did." Adrian pulled her close. "You were magnificent." I was terrified. My hands were shaking the entire time. I couldn't tell. "You looked like a queen passing judgment." She laughed, slightly hysterical. "A queen, me, the disgraced woman who arrived at Ashford Manor expecting to die in exile. You're not that woman anymore. You're the Duchess of Blackmore, my wife, the woman who survived hell and came out stronger." Adrian cupped her face. "The woman I love more than anything in this world." Lydia kissed him, there on the street where anyone could see, claiming her happiness publicly and without shame. When they broke apart, she was crying. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." She wiped her eyes. "For 18 months, I believed I'd never be happy again. That survival was the best I could hope for." And now I have my name back, and you, and a future that doesn't look like punishment, and I don't know how to. She broke off. I don't know how to stop waiting for it all to collapse. It won't collapse. Adrian pulled her close. I won't let it. We built this together, fought for it together. It's ours, Lydia. Our life, our choice. And no one can take that away. She held on to him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. And perhaps he was. The consortium accepted the terms before dawn. Written apologies were delivered to Blackmore House by messenger. Formal, legally binding documents that exonerated Adrian and Lydia completely and accepted full responsibility for the fraudulent scandal. The £50,000 from each member went to a charity Lydia established for women who'd lost their reputations to false accusations, a foundation that would help others survive what she'd survived. The Westminster Chronicle published the apologies on the front page. Within days, the shift was complete. Lydia Blackmore was no longer the vindicated victim. She was the triumphant survivor, the woman who'd beaten the men who tried to destroy her, a duchess who commanded respect not through birth or marriage, but through strength earned in fire. Invitations flooded Blackmore House. Society hostesses competed for the Blackmore's attendance. Young women sought Lydia's advice. Even the Queen sent a note of congratulations. Adrian watched it all with pride and amazement, because this wasn't just vindication, this was transformation. Lydia had gone from ruined woman to duchess to something more, a symbol, proof that survival was possible, that justice could be won, that cruelty didn't have to have the final word. 1 month after the confrontation at Lord Pemberton's dinner, Adrian found Lydia in their London townhouse garden, a small space she'd already begun transforming with the same vision she'd brought to Ashford. We received another invitation, he said, holding up an envelope. The Duchess of Marlborough wants you to speak at her ladies' salon about resilience and redemption. Lydia looked up from the rose bush she was pruning. That's the 5th invitation this week. You're in demand, the woman who defeated the conspiracy. Adrian sat beside her on the garden bench. How does it feel? She considered the question. Strange. Overwhelming. Like I'm playing a role in a story about someone else. She set down the pruning shears. All these women want to hear how I survived, how I stayed strong. But the truth is, I almost didn't. There were days in Northumberland when I wanted to give up, when the isolation and hopelessness felt like drowning. I didn't survive because I was strong. I survived because I was too stubborn to quit. That's still strength. Maybe. Or maybe it's just spite. She smiled slightly. Refusing to give Thomas and the consortium the satisfaction of breaking me completely. Whatever the reason, you're an inspiration now. Women see you and believe they can survive their own hells. Then I suppose I should accept the invitations. Lydia leaned against him. Use this platform for something good. Make the suffering worth something. They sat in comfortable silence, watching late afternoon sun paint the garden gold. Do you miss Ashford? Adrian asked. Every day. London is exciting, but Ashford felt like home, like a place I'd built with my own hands. We'll go back. As often as you want. It's still ours. Still yours. Ours, Lydia corrected gently. I don't want separate lives anymore, Adrian. No more your estate and my exile. Just our home. Our life. Our life, Adrian agreed. I like the sound of that. Lydia turned to look at him, something serious in her expression. Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, I mean. If you'd known the truth from the beginning, you could have had any woman in London, someone without scandal, without complicated history. If I'd known the truth from the beginning, I would have married you anyway. Adrian took her hand. Maybe not out of vengeance, but out of recognition. You're the strongest, bravest, most remarkable person I've ever met. Any man would be honored to call you his wife. Even when I'm covered in dirt and pruning roses instead of attending balls? Especially then, because that's when you're most yourself, building, creating, making beauty from nothing. She kissed him, soft and sweet. And in that moment, in a London garden with evening falling and the sounds of the city fading, two people who'd married as strangers, fought as enemies, and loved as partners, finally found peace. The conspiracy was defeated. The truth was known. Justice, imperfect but real, had been won, and what began as punishment had become something neither of them expected, a partnership built on respect, survival, and love earned through fire. The battle was over. But their story, the real story, the one about building a life together, was just beginning. The battle was over, but their story was just beginning. That thought sustained Lydia through the following months as London society transformed her from vindicated victim into something more complex. A woman who'd survived deliberate destruction and emerged not just intact, but powerful. Invitations continued flooding in. Her charity foundation grew beyond anything she'd imagined. Women wrote to her from across England, sharing their own stories of false accusation and asking for guidance. And through it all, Adrian remained beside her, not as the punishing husband who'd sent her into exile, but as a partner who'd learned that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest act was admitting you were wrong. But late at night, when the social performances ended and they were alone, Lydia still felt the weight of what they'd survived. The scars didn't disappear just because the battle was won. Some wounds took years to heal. She was thinking about this one evening in early spring when Adrian found her in their townhouse library, staring at a letter she'd received that morning. "What's wrong?" He crossed to her immediately, concern evident. "You've been holding that letter for an hour." Lydia handed it to him silently. Adrian read aloud. "Your Grace, my name is Catherine Winters. You don't know me, but I know your story. 6 months ago, my employer accused me of theft to cover his own embezzlement. I lost my position, my references, my reputation. I had nowhere to go until I read about your foundation. You helped me find work, gave me a chance when no one else would. Yesterday, my former employer was arrested. The truth came out. But it wouldn't have mattered if I'd starved before vindication arrived. You saved my life, and I wanted you to know." He looked up. "Lydia, this is wonderful. This is exactly what you hoped." "Is it?" Her voice was quiet. "One woman saved. How many more are out of there right now being destroyed by lies, with no one to help them?" "You can't save everyone." "Why not?" She stood, agitated. "We have resources, influence, connections. Why can't we do more?" Adrian studied her carefully. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking the charity helps women after they've been destroyed. But what if we could stop the destruction before it happens?" Lydia paced, ideas forming as she spoke. "Create a legal fund. Hire investigators to examine accusations before they ruin lives. Give people the resources to defend themselves instead of just accepting blame because fighting back is too expensive." "That's ambitious and expensive." "I know. But Thomas's assets that you transferred to me, they're sitting unused because I can't bear to touch money built on betrayal. What if we used it for this? Turn something evil into something good?" Adrian moved to her, taking her hands. "You're extraordinary. You know that?" "I'm angry." Lydia's voice shook. "I'm still so angry, Adrian. At Thomas, at the consortium, at everyone who believed their lies without question. And anger doesn't just disappear because we won. It sits here," she pressed a hand to her chest, "burning. I need to do something with it before it consumes me." "Then let's build something." Adrian pulled her close. "Let's turn your anger into action. We'll create the fund, hire the investigators, help as many people as we can, and every person we save will be proof that cruelty doesn't get the final word." Lydia held on to him, feeling the tension finally ease. "When did you become so wise?" "When I married a woman who taught me that strength isn't about power, it's about what you do with suffering. You could have let what happened destroy you. Instead, you're using it to help others. That's not just strength. That's transformation." She kissed him, grateful and fierce. "Help me build this. Not as my husband funding my project, but as a partner who believes in what we're doing. Always." Pumped. They launched the Blackmore Legal Defense Fund 3 months later with a public event that drew half of London's society. Lydia spoke to a packed ballroom about the cost of false accusations and the importance of presuming innocence instead of guilt. The newspapers covered it extensively. Donations poured in, not just from the wealthy, but from ordinary people who'd seen injustice firsthand and wanted to fight it. Within 6 months, the fund had helped 30 women and 12 men defend themselves against false charges. Some cases were won, some were lost. But every person received competent legal representation and a fair chance, luxuries Lydia never had. The work consumed her in the best possible way. She interviewed applicants personally, listened to their stories, made decisions about which cases the fund would support. Adrian helped with the legal and financial logistics, but the vision was entirely Lydia's. And society noticed. The Duchess of Blackmore became synonymous with justice and redemption. Her charity events attracted royalty. Her opinions on legal reform were quoted in Parliament. She transformed from scandal victim to social reformer, using her platform to change laws and challenge systems that enabled false accusations. It should have felt like victory. But on a cold October evening, as Lydia reviewed case files in the townhouse library, she found herself crying without understanding why. Adrian discovered her there an hour later, tears streaming silently as she read a letter from a woman they'd helped. Someone who'd been falsely accused of adultery by a vindictive husband and lost her children before the fund's lawyers proved the accusations were fabricated. "We won," Lydia whispered when Adrian sat beside her. "We got our children back. Why does it still hurt?" Because winning one case doesn't erase the pain that created it. Adrian took the letter gently from her hands. "Lydia, you're carrying everyone's suffering. Every woman you help, every story you hear, you're taking their pain into yourself. You can't sustain this. Someone has to care. We do care. But caring doesn't mean drowning in other people's trauma." He pulled her close. "When was the last time you slept properly, ate a full meal, did something that wasn't related to the fund?" Lydia couldn't remember. "You're burning yourself out," Adrian said gently, "just like you did at Ashford, working until you collapsed with fever. You survived exile, defeated the consortium, built something remarkable, but you're still trying to prove you deserve to exist." The words struck like a physical blow, because he was right. Despite everything, the vindication, the success, the love, part of Lydia still believed she needed to earn her place in the world through endless work and sacrifice. "I don't know how to stop," she admitted. "Every time I rest, every time I do something for myself, I feel guilty, like I'm wasting time when I could be helping someone." "That's what they did to you, Thomas, the consortium, even me at the beginning. We all made you feel like your worth was conditional, like you had to constantly prove you deserved kindness." Adrian's voice was rough with emotion. "But it's not true. You don't have to earn love or rest or happiness. They're yours by right of being human. Intellectually, I know that, but emotionally," she broke off, "it's hard to believe something you've never experienced." "Then let me help you learn." Adrian stood, pulling her with him. "Starting now. No case files tonight. No letters, no petitions, no work of any kind. Just us. Adrian, I have 3 cases to review. They'll wait. You matter more than any case." He led her out of the library despite her protests. "We're going to have dinner, actual dinner, not working through a meal at your desk. Then we're going to sit by the fire and read something frivolous. And tomorrow, we're leaving London." "Leaving? We have the charity gala next week, which your very capable staff can manage without you." Adrian's voice was firm. "We're going back to Ashford Manor for a month, minimum. You need to remember what it feels like to rest." Lydia wanted to argue, but the exhaustion that had been building for months suddenly felt overwhelming. "A month," she said quietly. "Can we really afford—" "We can afford anything that keeps you healthy and whole." Adrian cupped her face. "You saved me, Lydia. You sacrificed yourself, survived exile, defeated the people who tried to destroy you. Now, let me save you from the one enemy you can't fight alone, yourself." She leaned into his touch, feeling tears come again, but this time they were tears of relief. Because for the first time since the scandal began, someone was telling her it was okay to stop fighting, okay to rest, okay to be human instead of heroic. "Take me home," she whispered. "Take me to Ashford." They arrived at Ashford Manor in late October, when the moors blazed with autumn color and the air carried the sharp bite of approaching winter. The staff greeted them with obvious joy. Mrs. Crawford, Mr. Graves, even the gardeners who'd helped Lydia build her first gardens 2 years ago. 2 years. Had it only been 2 years since Adrian had sent her here as punishment? It felt like a lifetime. The manor welcomed them like old friends. Lydia walked through rooms she'd restored, gardens she'd planted, spaces she'd transformed from decay into life. Every corner held memories, some painful, some beautiful, all part of the journey that had brought them here. "I'd forgotten how quiet it is," she said that first evening as they stood on the terrace overlooking the moors. No carriages, no social calls, no constant demands. Just space to breathe. Adrian wrapped his arms around her from behind. "That's what you need. Permission to breathe." They fell into a rhythm over the following days. Mornings in the garden, working soil and planting bulbs for spring. Afternoons reading by the fire or walking the moors. Evenings talking, really talking, about everything from philosophy to their childhoods to their hopes for the future. Lydia felt herself slowly unfurling, like a plant that had been kept too long in darkness finally reaching toward light. And Adrian watched it happen with quiet satisfaction. 1 week into their stay, Mrs. Crawford appeared with news. "Your Grace, there's a visitor. Says she traveled from London specifically to see the Duchess. Should I send her away?" Lydia and Adrian exchanged glances. They'd come here to escape visitors. "Who is it?" Lydia asked. "A Miss Catherine Winters, Your Grace. Says you helped her some months ago?" Catherine. The woman from the letter. The one whose employer had been arrested for embezzlement. "I'll see her," Lydia said, curiosity overriding her desire for solitude. Catherine Winters was a young woman in her 20s, plainly dressed, but carrying herself with quiet dignity. She curtsied when Lydia entered the drawing room. "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. I know you came here for privacy, but I needed to speak with you in person." "It's fine. Please, sit. How are you? Did you find new employment?" "I did. Better employment, actually, working for a barrister who specializes in defending the falsely accused. He hired me specifically because of my experience. Said someone who'd survived false accusations would be invaluable helping others." Catherine smiled. "That's actually why I'm here. He sent me to make you an offer." She handed Lydia a letter. Lydia read it with growing interest. The barrister, Edmund Hartford, renowned for his work on wrongful conviction cases, was proposing a partnership. He wanted to join forces with the Blackmore Legal Defense Fund, expanding its reach and capabilities. But more than that, he was offering Lydia a position, advisor and advocate, using her experience and insight to help shape legal strategy. "He thinks I could help?" Lydia looked up, surprised. "He thinks you're exactly what this work needs. Someone who understands the human cost of false accusations from personal experience. Someone who can speak to judges and juries with authentic authority." Catherine leaned forward. "Your Grace, you've built something remarkable in London, but imagine what you could do with legal expertise backing you. Imagine changing laws, not just helping individuals. Imagine preventing the kind of destruction you survived." It was tempting, incredibly tempting. But Lydia thought about Adrian's words, about burning herself out, about proving her worth through endless work. "I'm honored," she said carefully, "but I need to think about it. I've been pushing myself too hard lately. I can't commit to more work until I'm sure I can sustain it." Catherine nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course. Mr. Hartford said there's no rush. The offer stands whenever you're ready." She paused. "Your Grace, can I tell you something? Please. When I was at my lowest, when I'd lost everything and saw no way forward, I read about you in the newspapers, about how you'd been destroyed and rebuilt yourself, about how you chose to help others instead of hiding from the world." Catherine's voice grew thick with emotion. "You saved my life before we ever met, just by existing, by showing that survival was possible. That's worth more than any legal work, just being proof that they don't win, that we can come back from ruin." Lydia felt tears rising. "Thank you for telling me that. Thank you for fighting, for all of us." After Catherine left, Lydia found Adrian in the library. "Hartford's offer is intriguing," she said, showing him the letter. Adrian read it thoughtfully. "It is. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to jump at it. The work is important. The impact could be enormous. But another part..." She trailed off. Another part knows that saving the world won't heal you if you destroy yourself doing it, Adrian finished quietly. Yes. Lydia sank into the chair beside him. How do I find balance between doing meaningful work and taking care of myself? You start by recognizing you don't have to choose between them. You can do important work without martyring yourself. Adrian set down the letter. What if you took Hartford's offer, but with boundaries, specific hours, defined responsibilities, built-in rest time? Use your influence strategically instead of trying to personally save every person who needs help. It was sensible advice, but it still felt wrong somehow, like she was abandoning people who needed her. Adrian saw the conflict in her face. Lydia, what Catherine said was true. You save people just by existing, by being proof that survival is possible. But you can't be that proof if you work yourself to death. You're more valuable to this cause, healthy and sustainable, than burned out and broken. When did you become so wise about this? When I almost lost you to fever because you couldn't stop proving your worth. Adrian's voice was rough. I won't watch you do that again. Not for any cause, no matter how important. Lydia moved to sit in his lap, needing the physical closeness. Help me believe I'm enough. Not what I do, not who I save, just me. You are enough. Adrian held her tight. You've always been enough. The rest of the world just took too long to see it. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet manner that had witnessed both their destruction and their rebuilding. And slowly, Lydia felt something shift inside her. Maybe she didn't have to prove anything anymore. Maybe surviving was enough. Maybe being loved and learning to love herself was the real victory. They stayed at Ashford for 6 weeks instead of 1 month. During that time, Lydia made decisions that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. She delegated most of the charity's day-to-day operations to capable staff. She accepted Hartford's offer, but with strict boundaries: advisory work only, limited hours, no personal case management. She stopped reading every application, responding to every letter, carrying everyone's suffering as her own. It felt like letting go, like trust, like freedom. And she discovered something unexpected. The work didn't suffer from her reduced involvement. If anything, it flourished as other people stepped into leadership roles, bringing fresh perspectives and energy. She wasn't the only one who could make a difference. That realization was both humbling and liberating. Adrian watched the transformation with quiet pride. His wife, brilliant, stubborn, indomitable, was finally learning what he'd known all along, that her worth wasn't measured in achievements or sacrifices, but in the simple fact of her existence. One evening in late November, as the first snow fell across the moors, they stood on the terrace wrapped in cloaks and each other. I've been thinking, Lydia said softly, about the future. What about it? I want children. The words came out in a rush. I know that's complicated, given everything we've been through. And I know we haven't discussed it, but I want to build a family here at Ashford. I want to fill this house with life and laughter and noise. I want to create something that's ours, not defined by scandal or survival, just joy. Adrian turned her to face him, eyes searching. You're sure? I'm sure. For so long, I couldn't imagine a future beyond surviving the next day. But now, for the first time, I can see years ahead. Decades, a whole life. She gripped his hands. A life I want to share with you. Children who'll grow up knowing they're loved unconditionally, who'll never have to earn their worth. A legacy built on kindness instead of cruelty. Then that's what we'll build. Adrian kissed her, soft and deep. A family, a legacy. Everything you never thought you'd have. Everything we'll have together, Lydia corrected. Snow continued falling around them, transforming the harsh moorland into something beautiful. And in that moment, standing in the place that had once been her prison and was now her home, Lydia finally understood what redemption really meant. Not vindication, not revenge, not even justice, just the freedom to build a future unburdened by the past. They returned to London in December for the charity's annual gala, the one event Lydia insisted on attending personally. The ballroom was packed with supporters and donors, all eager to celebrate another successful year. The fund had helped over 200 people, influenced 3 pieces of legislation, and inspired similar organizations in other cities. But the highlight of the evening came when Lydia took the podium to speak. She looked out at the assembled crowd, aristocrats and reformers, victims and advocates, people from every level of society united by a common belief that justice mattered. 2 years ago, she began, voice clear and strong, I stood falsely accused, completely ruined, with nowhere to go and no one to defend me. I confessed to crimes I didn't commit because I believed it was the only way to protect someone I loved. And I spent 18 months in exile, convinced my life was over. The ballroom was silent. I was wrong. My life wasn't over. It was waiting to begin. Because sometimes destruction is just preparation for transformation. Sometimes hitting bottom is what gives you the strength to build yourself back up. And sometimes the people who try to destroy you accidentally give you the tools to become something they never imagined. She paused, finding Adrian in the crowd. He smiled and she drew strength from it. This fund exists because I survived, because Adrian, my husband, my partner, chose to investigate instead of assuming he knew the truth, because people like Catherine Winters and Edmund Hartford believed that justice was worth fighting for. But mostly, it exists because too many people have been destroyed by lies, and we decided that had to stop. Applause began building. In the past year, we've helped hundreds of people defend themselves against false accusations. We've changed laws, we've challenged systems. But our real achievement isn't the numbers, it's the lives. Every person who gets to keep their reputation, their family, their future, because we gave them the resources to fight back. That's what matters. That's why we do this work. The applause grew louder. And here's what I want you to understand. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to let cruelty have the final word. Every person in this room can do the same. You don't need to survive exile or defeat conspiracies. You just need to see injustice and decide to care more about truth than comfort. That's all activism is, caring enough to act. She looked out at the crowd, at faces rapt with attention. So thank you for supporting this work, for believing that change is possible, for proving that we're stronger together than any force that tries to destroy us, and for reminding me that survival isn't just about enduring, it's about building something better from the ashes. She stepped back as the ballroom erupted in applause. Adrian met her at the edge of the stage, pulling her into his arms despite the watching crowd. Perfectly said, he murmured against her hair. I meant every word. I know. That's what made it perfect. They stayed for another hour, accepting congratulations and speaking with donors. But eventually they slipped away, back to the townhouse, back to privacy, back to each other. In their bedroom, as London settled into sleep outside the windows, Lydia looked at her husband and marveled at the journey that had brought them here. Do you remember our wedding day? She asked quietly. Every detail, the rain, the empty church, how composed you were when I expected tears. I was terrified, but I couldn't let you see it because I thought showing weakness would make everything worse. Lydia moved closer. I spent our entire first year together, hiding every emotion, every fear, every moment of pain, because I believed that was survival, becoming invisible, making no demands, asking for nothing. And now? Now I know survival isn't about invisibility. It's about claiming space even when people want you gone. It's about building instead of hiding. It's about demanding better instead of accepting cruelty as inevitable. She cupped his face. You taught me that. By investigating when you could have ignored me, by choosing truth over comfort, by loving me even when I'd given you every reason to hate me. Adrian pulled her close, emotion thick in his voice. You gave me a reason to believe in redemption. Mine and everyone else's. Before you, I thought justice was about punishment, making people pay for wrongs. You showed me justice is actually about restoration, making things right instead of making people suffer. We learned together. We did, and we're still learning. Adrian kissed her softly. But I know this much. Whatever comes next, children, causes, challenges, we face it together, as partners, as equals, as two people who survived hell and chose love anyway. Lydia held on to him, feeling the last pieces of armor finally fall away. She'd spent so long protecting herself, building walls, believing that safety meant isolation. But true safety wasn't about walls. It was about finding someone who made you brave enough to be vulnerable. And she'd found that someone in the last person she'd expected, the man who'd married her as punishment and loved her into healing. "I love you," she whispered, "not because you saved me, but because you let me save myself. Because you gave me space to be broken and time to rebuild. Because you saw me, really saw me, when everyone else was too busy believing lies." "I love you," Adrian replied, "because you're the strongest person I know, and you use that strength to lift others instead of crushing them. Because you survived the unsurvivable and came out kinder instead of bitter. Because you taught me that courage isn't about fighting, it's about choosing hope when hope seems impossible." They made love that night with a tenderness born of deep understanding. Two people who'd started as strangers, survived as enemies, and loved as partners who'd fought for every moment of happiness they now shared. And afterward, as Lydia drifted toward sleep in Adrian's arms, she thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago. Scared, ruined, convinced her life was over. If she could go back and tell that woman what was coming, the exile, the illness, the battle with the consortium, but also the gardens, the vindication, the love, would that woman have believed her? Probably not. Sometimes the future was too impossible to imagine until you were living it. Spring came to Ashford Manor with explosive beauty. The gardens Lydia had planted 2 years ago bloomed in cascades of color, roses and peonies and climbing vines that softened the manor's severe stone walls. The grounds she'd restored thrived under careful management. The staff moved with pride instead of resignation, knowing they maintained something worth keeping. And in the nursery, freshly renovated and filled with light, Lydia stood with her hand on her swollen belly, feeling their first child move. "Active today," Adrian said, coming up behind her and placing his hand beside hers. "Very. I think we're raising a fighter. With you as a mother? Inevitable." Adrian kissed her temple. "Though I hope they inherit your strength and my restraint. Otherwise, we're in trouble." Lydia laughed. "Your restraint? You once threatened to destroy an entire consortium because they insulted me." "Exactly. Restraint. I only threatened. I could have actually destroyed them." "My hero," she said, teasing but meaning it. They stood together, looking out at the moorland stretching endless and beautiful beyond the gardens. This view had once represented exile and punishment. Now it represented home. "Do you ever regret it?" Lydia asked quietly. "Marrying me, I mean. You could have had a normal life, a wife without scandal, a quiet existence managing estates and attending balls. Instead, you got conspiracies and charity work and a wife who can't stop trying to save the world." Adrian turned her to face him. "I got the woman I love and a purpose worth pursuing. That's better than any quiet existence." He paused. "But I do have one regret." Her heart clenched. "What?" "That I wasted 18 months making you suffer when I could have been loving you. That I believed lies instead of investigating truth. That I sent you into exile when I should have been protecting you." His voice was rough. "I can't get that time back, Lydia. I can't undo the cruelty or erase the pain. It haunts me." "Don't let it." Lydia took his face in her hands. "Yes, you hurt me. Yes, you were wrong. But you also changed. You investigated when it would have been easier to stay ignorant. You exposed the conspiracy when it would have been safer to stay silent. You chose truth over comfort and me over pride. That's what matters. Not that you made mistakes, but that you corrected them. You're too forgiving. I'm selective about what I hold on to. Anger, resentment, bitterness, they don't serve me anymore. I spent 18 months drowning in them. I won't give them another minute of my life." She smiled. "Besides, if you hadn't sent me to Ashford, I would never have built the gardens or learned my own strength. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best outcomes." That's a very generous interpretation of exile. That's survival, finding meaning in suffering instead of letting it consume you. The baby kicked hard and both of them felt it. "Definitely a fighter," Adrian said, wonder in his voice. "Our fighter. The first of many, if we're lucky." "Many?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. "How many are we talking?" "Enough to fill this house with noise and chaos and joy. Enough that when they're grown, they'll look back and know they were loved unconditionally, that they never had to earn their place or prove their worth." Lydia's voice grew fierce. "I want to build a family where children are safe to be themselves, where mistakes are learning opportunities instead of disasters, where love isn't conditional on performance. Then that's what we'll build, Adrian promised, starting with this one. They stood in the nursery as afternoon light painted everything gold, planning a future neither of them had imagined possible 2 years ago. A future built not on revenge or punishment or suffering, but on the radical choice to love anyway, to hope anyway, to build anyway. Their daughter was born in late summer during a thunderstorm that reminded them both of the night they'd truly begun. The night at Ashford, when Adrian had watched Lydia burn with fever and finally understood what she'd sacrificed. They named her Hope. Hope Lydia Blackmore, future Duchess, first child of a love story that started with cruelty and ended with redemption. Lydia held her daughter for the first time and wept, not from pain or fear, but from overwhelming gratitude that she'd survived long enough to experience this moment. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "You have no idea what your parents went through to get here. Someday we'll tell you the whole story, the scandal, the exile, the conspiracy. But right now all you need to know is that you're loved, completely, unconditionally, forever loved." Adrian stood beside the bed, looking at his wife and daughter with an expression of such pure joy it almost hurt to witness. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For surviving. For forgiving me. For building this with me." He touched Hope's tiny hand with one finger. "For giving me a future I don't deserve but will spend every day trying to earn. You already earned it by choosing truth, by fighting for me when it would have been easier to walk away, by loving me even when I was broken." Lydia looked up at him. "We earned each other, Adrian, through fire and struggle and choosing each other every day, even when it was hard. That's what makes this real." Hope yawned, tiny and perfect. And in that moment, holding their daughter while thunder rolled outside and rain washed the moorland clean, Lydia finally understood what her journey had been about. Not revenge, not vindication, not even justice. It had been about transformation, taking cruelty and transmuting it into kindness, taking suffering and building strength, taking the worst thing that ever happened and using it to create something beautiful. She'd been destroyed by lies and rebuilt by truth. She'd been punished for courage and vindicated by persistence. She'd been sent into exile as a prisoner and emerged as a duchess, who commanded respect not through birth or marriage, but through the force of her own character. And now she was a mother, starting a legacy that would echo for generations. The cruel Duke's bride had become so much more than anyone, including herself, had imagined possible. 5 years later, Ashford Manor buzzed with life. Hope had 2 younger siblings now, twin boys who ran through the gardens Lydia maintained, chasing each other with wooden swords and shrieking with laughter. The nursery wing had been expanded, the staff had grown, the manor itself seemed to breathe with vitality. The Blackmore Legal Defense Fund had helped thousands of people and inspired legal reforms across England. Lydia served as an advisor but had learned to set boundaries, to say no, to protect her own peace while still doing meaningful work. Adrian had rebuilt the Blackmore fortune and reputation through shrewd investments and strategic partnerships. But more importantly, he'd rebuilt his own character, learning that strength meant admitting mistakes, that pride could be a prison, and that the best thing he'd ever done was love a woman who taught him what courage really meant. On a bright autumn morning, they stood together on the terrace overlooking the moorland, older now, marked by time and parenthood and 5 years of building a life together. "Do you remember the first time we stood here?" Lydia asked, "the night you returned from London with the newspaper?" "I remember. You'd just learned your name was restored. You were crying. I thought vindication would fix everything, that being proven innocent would heal all the wounds." Lydia leaned against him. "I was wrong. Vindication helped, but what really healed me was time. And you. And learning that my worth wasn't determined by what other people believed about me. What healed me," Adrian said quietly, "was watching you survive what I put you through and still choose kindness, still choose to help others, still choose love even when you had every reason to choose bitterness." He turned to face her. "You made me want to be better. Not because you demanded it, but because you deserved it." Behind them, the children's laughter echoed through the house. "They'll ask someday," Lydia said, "about the scandal. about why their mother was once one of London's most reviled women. And what will you tell them? The truth. That people believed lies because lies are easier than investigation. That I chose sacrifice over safety because love demanded it. That their father made mistakes but corrected them. That we were broken and rebuilt each other. She paused. That cruelty doesn't have to have the final word if you're brave enough to write a better ending. That's a good story. It's our story, and I'm proud of every difficult, painful, beautiful part of it. Adrian pulled her close, and they stood watching the moorland, harsh and beautiful, unforgiving and magnificent, exactly like the journey that had brought them here. The world that had once condemned Lydia now respected her. The man who had once punished her now cherished her. The exile that should have destroyed her had instead revealed her strength, and what began as a marriage built on ashes had become a legacy built on love. Not the easy, comfortable love of fairy tales, but the hard-won, battle-tested love of two people who'd survived hell and chosen each other anyway. The cruel Duke's bride had written her own ending, and it was better than anything anyone could have imagined. Years later, historians would study the Blackmore Legal Defense Fund and wonder about the woman who created it. They'd read about the scandal that almost destroyed a duke and duchess, about the conspiracy that was exposed, about the love story that captured society's imagination. But they'd missed the real story, the one that couldn't be captured in documents or newspaper accounts. The story of a woman who survived the unsurvivable and used that survival to help others. The story of a man who learned that admitting you're wrong is stronger than being right. The story of two broken people who rebuilt each other into something better than they'd been separately. That story lived on in their children, in the countless lives their foundation touched, in the changed laws and reform systems they'd fought for. But mostly, it lived in the simple fact that cruelty hadn't won. Love had. Truth had. And two people who should have been destroyed instead built something that would outlast them all. A legacy of justice, a foundation of hope, a family born from ashes and built on the radical belief that redemption is always possible. That's the real story of the cruel Duke's bride. And it's better than any fairy tale. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. From that first rainy night in London to the love and legacy built at Ashford Manor, we've witnessed two people transform from enemies to partners to parents. Lydia proved that survival isn't just endurance, it's choosing to build something beautiful from pain. Adrian learned that real strength means admitting you're wrong and fighting to make it right. Together, they showed us that the worst beginnings can lead to the best endings if you're brave enough to keep fighting for truth. If this story moved you, if you believed in their journey, drop a comment telling me what part resonated most. And remember, in your own life, when cruelty tries to have the final word, you have the power to write a better ending. Thank you for watching.